Chapter 60. The marriage between Cheng's group and Yuan's group had become the hottest topic in Hua City recently. Of course, even if the pervasive news media had gotten the news early, the confidentiality measures of the two families were very strict. Until the wedding was held, no media had successfully infiltrated the scene. Yuan Su and Qing Shiji exchanged rings with each other under everyone's witness. "Cici, I'm so happy. I've finally waited for this day." The two touched their foreheads, and Yuan Su whispered to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin blinked. "Dear, I'm also very happy." Yuan Hang looked at this pair of incomparably well-matched newlyweds. Everyone could see the affection and happiness flowing between them. He suddenly felt a little sour in his heart. Once, he really liked a woman so much that he could fight against his family for her. He just wanted to marry her, but what happened in the end? Yuan Hang thought in a trance. Suddenly, he found that Qing Yiru's face was blurred in his memory. Forget it, Yuan Hang thought. He would go on another path in the future. He would accept the family's arrangement and marry a woman who was well-matched in appearance and family background. Then, he would become a qualified husband and a qualified father. Hua City International Airport. As soon as Gu Xingyin got off the plane, she saw the man who had been waiting by the side. Yuan Su reached out and held her fingers. He was a little dissatisfied. "Why are you so cold?" As he spoke, he wrapped the scarf around Gu Xingyin's neck and stole a kiss at the corner of her mouth. Gu Xingyin glared at him, but the smile at the corner of her mouth couldn't be stopped. Click. When the two of them didn't notice, a photo was secretly taken. So, the next day, Gu Xingyin woke up from the bed and was complaining about a man who didn't know how to control himself when she received a call from her mother. "Cici, I'm relieved to see that your relationship is still so good after so many years." This was the voice of Qing Shiji's mother. "Cici, although I know that you and brother-in-law are very loving, it's not right to abuse the single person when you come back this time." This was her second brother, Qing Qishuan, who was still single in his 30s. Qing Qishuan had the romantic factor of an artist. He had a lot of female companions around him, but he had never stopped for anyone. "Little auntie, you're so shy." This was the little princess of Big Brother's family, Qing Lingxi. Gu Xingyin was wondering what had happened. When she walked into the hall, she heard the news broadcast on the television. The photo of her and Yuan Su kissing appeared in the photo. Gu Xingyin blushed. Apparently, the two of them had been photographed at the airport yesterday. No wonder his family said that. She called Yuan Su and told him about it. Yuan Su said calmly, "I kissed my wife." "What's wrong with that? Is that not allowed?" Gu Xingyin was speechless. He shook his head and thought about it carefully. What was he thinking about? Oh my God, the relationship between the Yuan Group's CEO and that woman is so good. In a shopping mall, several shopping assistants took advantage of the fact that no one was there to gossip. The news said that they have been married for 10 years. Look, they picked her up at the airport, gave her a scarf, and kissed passionately. It's even more romantic than an idol drama. A warehouse worker passed by with a few big boxes, and several people quickly moved aside. She had 2 broken fingers on each of her hands. Qing Yiru listened to those people talking about how happy the two of them were, but she didn't stop working. There were still more than a dozen boxes. She could only get off work after she finished unloading them. She looked up at the LCD TV on the wall. On the screen, a man and a woman were hugging each other affectionately. When they looked at each other, the affection in their eyes was undisguised. It felt like a lifetime ago. Chapter 61. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes again and found herself back in the pure white space. She stretched out her hand. It was white, soft, and full of vitality. It was not the pale and wrinkled hand she had in the previous world. Qing Shiji had no regrets in her life. Even at the end of her life, she left in the arms of the person she loved the most. Thinking of Yuan Su, Gu Xingyin's mouth unconsciously raised into a smile. "System, can you tell me now who Yuan Su is?" Gu Xingyin asked. She was not stupid. Someone who could be reincarnated in a different world with her could not be an ordinary person. However, the omniscient system was stuck this time. Unable to find any information about the target Yuan Su. Unable to find any information about the target Jiyu, Gu Xingyin was really surprised this time. She knew very well that the system would not lie. If it did not want to tell her, it would at most say, "Sorry, the host does not have enough authority to tell you." If the system said that it could not find anything, it meant that it really did not know what kind of existence her lover was. Gu Xingyin was also quite curious. What kind of identity could a person who could not be detected by the system? The system said, "Host, do you want to rest for a while or go to the next mission world?" Gu Xingyin chose to go on with the mission without hesitation. She could not wait to see her lover. The mission world this time was a Western fantasy world. There were ordinary people, swordsmen, magicians, and magical beasts led by giant dragons. The female protagonist of this world was the first Duke of the Carter Empire in this world. As the heir of the White Rose Duke Mansion, Veronica Roman was a natural swordswoman. When she was born and baptized, she was tested by the Archbishop at that time to have a godlike aptitude, and was personally accepted as a goddaughter. Veronica's life was also quite glorious. She carried the glory of the White Rose family all her life. After inheriting the title of Duke, she fought for the Carter Empire all her life. Under her efforts, the reputation of the White Rose family was almost on par with the royal family. She was also praised by historians as one of the greatest women of the Carter dynasty. Such a legendary figure who had left his name in the annals of history had been obliterated by a useless cannon fodder from a small family in a remote city. Eve Heather was just a fisherman's daughter. When she was born, her mother died in childbirth because of her. Because of this, her father especially hated this ominous daughter and beat and scolded her since she was young. Finally, when Eve was 8 years old, she pushed her drunk father into the river. Then, he packed up his belongings and left the small mountain village. In the process of escaping, Eve picked up the treasure that changed her life, the necklace that sealed the Demon King. After being sealed in the necklace for countless years, the Demon King had finally escaped. At that time, he was already extremely weak and had no choice but to sign a contract with Eve. The Demon King, who had lived for tens of thousands of years, had a rich store of knowledge and knew how to improve Eve's trash aptitude to an excellent level. As compensation, Eve had to provide the Demon King with the best medicine for his recovery, the souls of living people. The higher the aptitude of the mage or swordsman, the more benefits the Demon King could obtain from absorbing their soul. The female lead, Veronica, was one of the Demon King's biggest targets. She was said to have the potential to be a god. Chapter 62. Gu Xingyin was lying on a bench in the White Rose Garden, receiving the memories transmitted by the system. So, my first task is to stay alive? The previous worlds were relatively gentle, but she did not expect this world to be so cruel. The system's calm voice sounded, "Yes, the host. The system has detected that your body is 13 years old, and the cannon fodder Eve is 10 years old. At this time, she has already obtained the necklace that sealed the Demon King, and is on her way to the king's city." Gu Xingyin was silent for a moment, then asked, "System, if I were to fight the Demon King now, what are the chances of me defeating him?" The system answered honestly, "None." Gu Xingyin, she was secretly thinking, should she tell her godfather, the Archbishop, that Eve was carrying the necklace that sealed the Demon King? The system poured cold water on her without mercy. "I don't recommend the host to do this. The original body has never left the king's city, so you can't explain how you know this. If the host really does this, it is very likely that you and Eve will be eliminated as heretics." Gu Xingyin could only give up this tempting idea. "Your Highness, the second prince is here to see you." A maid came forward, waking Gu Xingyin from her meditation. Gu Xingyin elegantly got up, nodded to the maid, and walked towards the reception hall. "Veronica." From afar, a young man's voice called out to her. Veronica walked over unhurriedly, and gave the person a standard aristocratic salute, "Your Highness the second prince." The young man's beautiful eyebrows suddenly wrinkled. "I've told you many times, Veronica, there is no need to be so polite in front of me. Gu Xingyin's expression did not change. Your Highness, etiquette cannot be ignored. Liv Man was helpless. All right, Veronica, your father the Duke has taught you too old-fashioned. Gu Xingyin's expression became serious. Your Highness, please do not criticize my elders. Liv Man looked at the girl in front of him. The 13-year-old girl was already very tall, and her figure was beginning to show the embryonic form of a woman. The heir of the White Rose family had golden curly hair that was as bright as the sun. Her pure eyes were like the purest green gems. Her milk-white skin was inherited from her mother, the Duchess of White Rose. She also had delicate lips that were like flower petals. It was a pleasure to be able to hear his name from her mouth. The Pearl of the Empire. Liv Man did not know how many times he had heard the nobles secretly talk about the heir of the Duke. She was as dazzling and charming as her family emblem, the White Rose. Unfortunately, Liv Man looked at Veronica's serious and expressionless face and sighed secretly. The Duke of White Rose was known for his strictness in the empire. He had taught his only daughter to be this way, old-fashioned, well-mannered, and her every move was as standard as what was written in the textbooks. Your Highness the Prince, what do you want? His Highness the Prince? Liv Man came back to his senses, and remembered the purpose of his visit. My mother's purebred Siamese cat gave birth to 3 children, and I brought you one. Do you like it? Liv Man held up a delicate small basket as if he was presenting a treasure. Lifting the cloth on the small basket, Gu Xingyin saw the creature inside. Chapter 63. A little guy, not even the size of a palm, was lying on the soft cushion in the basket. His newborn eyes had not yet opened, and only his nose moved from time to time. Perhaps he was not used to the sudden light, and his body was slightly curled up. Of course she liked it. Gu Xingyin loved this kind of furry thing in her past life. She almost couldn't help but reach out to touch it. But she remembered Veronica's character and suppressed the urge. She just couldn't help but look at the kitten in the basket. Little did she know that in the eyes of the second prince, she was much cuter than the kitten in the basket. The beautiful little girl clearly liked the kitten so much that her eyes were almost glued to it, but she kept a straight face and pretended to be serious and unconcerned. In the end, she was still a child. The second prince only felt his index finger itch. He really wanted to pinch her face. The second prince put his finger back into his sleeve and handed the basket to Gu Xingyin. Here, take good care of her. This prince will check on her often. In a wild forest thousands of miles away from the king's city, a thin figure was trekking with difficulty. Your Excellency, why are we in such a hurry to go to the king's city? The figure asked in a clear voice. This person was Eve Heather. There was no sound coming from the ring, but Eve Heather didn't find it strange. She held the necklace in front of her chest with her empty left hand. The strange soul lived in the necklace around her neck. 2 months ago, when she picked up this necklace, it was just a simple girl who liked beautiful things and kept it. Until she saw the shadow in the necklace, or rather, the soul. The soul's offer was very tempting. As long as she helped him find enough souls, he would tell her how to improve her aptitude. Eve Heather agreed on the spot, even though what the soul wanted her to do was against God's will. But what did it matter? When she was abused and beaten by her father, she had prayed countless times to God to save her, but he didn't. Until she couldn't take it anymore and pushed the man into the river. She was really scared at that time. She was afraid that God would punish her for the crime of killing her own family. But nothing happened. From then on, she knew that the so-called God did not exist at all. In other words, the high and mighty gods did not care about the life and death of mortals like them. Therefore, when she knew that she had a chance to become stronger, she agreed to the soul's request without hesitation. However, there seems to be something wrong with that person recently. Eve Heather thought to herself. In the past, whenever His Excellency appeared, she would always have the illusion of being stared at by a venomous snake. But since last month, this feeling had disappeared. His Excellency's words were noticeably less, and he no longer asked her to find the souls of living people for him. His only request was to get to the royal city as soon as possible. Eve Heather always felt that His Excellency had become much easier to get along with. If it was in the past, she would never have dared to ask any questions. Don't think too much and don't ask too many questions. Whatever you want, I will naturally give it to you when the time comes. A cold voice appeared in her mind. It was that person. Eve Heather was startled. She lowered her head and replied respectfully. Chapter 64. When he woke up from the chaos, he found that he had become a creature that was neither human nor ghost. There were many inexplicable memories in his mind. For example, he used to be the king of the demons, who ruled the whole continent. Later, he was sealed in this necklace by a cunning human. He wandered for thousands of years before he fell into the hands of a human. He was very sure that he was not the so-called king of the demons. Because the previous memories of this soul instructed the girl he lived in to find the soul of a human. It was impossible for him to do such a thing. So, who was he? Where was the original body of this soul? He had been thinking about this question for a month, but he still could not figure it out. Until today, he finally figured it out. No matter who he was before, and no matter where the real body of the Demon King went, from the moment he woke up, he became the Demon King. His gaze pierced through the void and looked in the direction of King's City. There was an inexplicable desire in his heart, as if there was something very important in the distant King's City that was calling out to him. The outline of the sun had not yet appeared on the horizon, but the Duke's mansion of White Rose was already busy. Veronica got up early, put on the warrior's uniform, and began her daily morning exercise. Even though she was gifted by the heavens, her current strength could not be separated from hard work. Gu Xingyin's body was full of the power of fighting. She enjoyed this feeling very much. In the previous two worlds, whether it was Jianglingjin or Qingshiji, they were weak women who did not have the strength to truss a chicken. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, was a person who worshipped strength and the strong. Not to mention, according to the development of the plot, in 2 years, Eve Heather would bring the Demon King to King's City. Before that, she had to improve her strength as much as possible. Thus, the servants of the Duke's mansion found that their highness seemed to be more diligent than before. Richard, the Duke of White Rose, stood in front of the window in his room, looking at the small figure in the training field who was seriously practicing the swordsmanship he taught her a few days ago. There was no doubt that His Excellency the Duke was a rare handsome man. It was said that even Her Highness the Princess took a fancy to the Duke's handsome appearance and expressed her willingness to marry him. However, the Duke chose his current wife, Veronica's mother. Looking at his daughter, Richard could not help but feel proud. Although his wife and he only had one heir, Veronica did not let him down. She was smart, strong, and more outstanding than any of the heirs of the family. The Duke had no doubt that under Veronica's leadership, the glory of the White Rose family would illuminate the entire continent. Gu Xingyin's life was very regular. Every morning, she would do her routine morning exercise, then have dinner with her parents in the dining hall. After that, she would take the family carriage to the Carter Royal Academy to study. She would have lunch at the school and would not return to the Duke's mansion until 3 in the afternoon. Although the Duke of White Rose was strict, he was a good father who knew how to raise his daughter. Gu Xingyin was free to spend her time after returning home from the academy. Whether she was going out to play with noble ladies or to listen to an opera, even if she was going to the slums in the west of the city, other than sending people to protect her daughter's safety, the Duke of White Rose would not interfere too much. Sometimes, when his wife disagreed, he would persuade her instead. A qualified leader must have his own ideas. Veronica is already 13 years old. When I was her age, I followed my grandfather to the battlefield once. My dear, you must believe in our daughter. Chapter 65. Gu Xingyin carried Vera out of the door. Vera was the Siamese cat that the second prince had given to Veronica. A month had passed, and Vera's small body was covered with fine, soft white fur. She was very beautiful. She was still the size of an adult's palm, and her green eyes were the same as Veronica's. They were as beautiful as the brightest gems. Siamese cats were very delicate animals. This time, Gu Xingyin carried her out to the pet shop to buy a type of ingredient, svelte grass, which was the favorite food of Siamese cats. Mika. A girl with a few small freckles on her nose ran to Gu Xingyin. She was Veronica's good friend, Lilith Bill, the daughter of the Earl. Lilith had heard that Veronica had gotten a rare Siamese cat. After a long time of coaxing and pestering, she finally convinced Veronica to take her out. Is this a Siamese cat? She is so cute. Lilith looked at Vera with shining eyes. Yes, her name is Vera. She is a lovely lady, Gu Xingyin replied. Lilith reached out to touch Vera, but Vera turned her head away in disgust. Gu Xingyin snickered. Siamese cats were extremely delicate and fussy creatures. They usually only got close to the people they liked. Gu Xingyin himself had spent a lot of effort to get Vera's favor, so of course, Lilith would run into a wall. Lilith could see that Vera didn't like her. She said sadly, "It seems that Vera doesn't like me." Gu Xingyin was about to comfort her, but she heard her continue, "Really, her personality is so similar to Nika's." Gu Xingyin was speechless. She took back her words of comfort. Lilith was still talking. "You both have green eyes and are so cute." Ha ha ha. Gu Xingyin turned and left. The two of them arrived at the entrance of the pet shop. When the boss saw Gu Xingyin's green eyes, he hurriedly greeted her, "Your Highness, may I know what you need?" Pure dark green eyes were the symbol of the White Rose family. This was something that everyone in the royal city knew. In this generation of the Duke of White Rose, Veronica was the only heir. Anyone with a discerning eye could guess her identity. Gu Xingyin revealed Vera, who was lying in his arms. The grass she eats must be the freshest and most tender part. When the owner saw Vera, he smiled. "Oh, it's a Siamese cat. This is a precious little thing. I just happen to have some slender grass that was just delivered today. Your Highness, please wait for a moment. I'll go get it for you." Gu Xingyin and Lilith were sitting in the shop. Lilith was still trying to win Vera's favor, but she was always rejected. Gu Xingyin's expression didn't change, but there was a smile in her eyes as she looked at the woman and the cat. "Boss, wrap up all the slender grass in your shop for me." A loud voice sounded. Gu Xingyin looked up. It was a beautiful lady in red. Her eyebrows were full of arrogance. In her hand was a magic staff that was almost as tall as her. She was obviously a magician. When the lady in red saw Gu Xingyin and Lilith, her expression changed. "Why are you here?" Before Gu Xingyin could say anything, Lilith opened her mouth. "This pet shop doesn't belong to the Raymond family. If you can come, why can't we?" Chapter 66. Gu Xingyin went through the memories in his mind, and finally remembered who the magician in red was. Joanna Raymond. The granddaughter of the finance minister. Everyone in the Carter Empire knew that the Duke of White Rose and the finance minister were not on good terms. They always had different opinions when discussing national affairs, and neither could do anything to the other. Because of this, the younger generation of the two families did not like each other. There was another reason why Joanna did not like Veronica. People always compared the two of them. If it was just a simple comparison, the problem was that although she didn't want to admit it, Veronica Roman was indeed more outstanding than her, Joanna Raymond. They were of the same age, and Joanna was already a beginner magician. According to the level of magic, they started from the lowest apprentice, then went on to the sorcerer, sorcerer, grand sorcerer, and grand sorcerer. Joanna was undoubtedly a genius to be able to cultivate to the level of a magician at the age of 13. However, Veronica was also 13 years old, but she was already a great swordsman. Similarly, warriors were divided into swordsmen, great swordsman, legendary swordsman, and warrior saint. In terms of level, a great swordsman was equivalent to a grand sorcerer, which was 2 levels higher than Joanna. Over time, Joanna would subconsciously avoid Veronica. It was common knowledge that Joanna of the Raymond family was nowhere to be seen in the presence of Princess Veronica of the Roman family. As Veronica's good friend, Lilith naturally had to speak up for her friend at this time. At this time, the boss came out with a bag of fresh slimline grass. "I'm really sorry, miss. The slimline grass has been reserved by Her Highness in advance, the boss said to Joanna, very embarrassed. Joanna looked at Gu Shengyin. How much did you pay? I'll pay double. Give me the slimline grass. Gu Shengyin's answer was to pay the boss the crystal coins and put the slimline grass in the space ring. You. Joanna was exasperated. What she hated the most was the arrogant face of the Roman family. It was as if she was just a clown in their eyes. Gu Shengyin thought to herself, I'm not going to take the blame for this. With my facial paralysis persona, I can't give you a smile. Stop right there, Veronica Roman. Joanna's fireball flew past Gu Shengyin's clothes. If Gu Shengyin hadn't dodged it, her robe would have been ruined. Gu Shengyin turned around with a hint of anger in her eyes. Xiao Anna was a little guilty. She just wanted to warn Veronica, but she didn't expect that she was too emotional and lost her aim. However, she could not show her fear in front of the Roman family. She raised her chin and said, I told you to stop. I want the slender grass in your hands. If not for the fact that the slender grass was so hard to find, she would not have bothered Veronica Roman. At this time, Vera, who was in Gu Shengyin's arms, poked her head out and called out softly. Joanna's expression changed. Is that a Siamese cat in your arms? Gu Shengyin did not say anything. Joanna's face was pale. I've asked him for it so many times, but he refused to give it to me. It turns out that he gave it to you. Gu Shengyin immediately understood why Joanna wanted the slimline grass. She suddenly felt that Joanna was a little pitiful. It was just a story of how the falling flower fell in love with the heartless brook. But sympathy was one thing. She would never give up Vera's rations. Chapter 67. Joanna seemed to have lost her soul. She glanced at Gu Shengyin, stomped her feet, and left. Gu Shengyin asked the shopkeeper to send the things to the Duke's mansion, and walked on the street with Lilith. Lilith came over and gossiped, Joanna likes the second prince. She knows that the second prince asked the queen for a Siamese cat. She must want to get some slender grass to please the prince. She was gloating. She must not have thought that the prince had already given it to you. At this point, Lilith mysteriously said to Gu Shengyin, Nika, do you think His Highness likes you? She looked at Gu Shengyin seriously, touched her chin, and said, Nika, you are so beautiful. If I were a gentleman, would marry you. Gu Shengyin replied to her with an expressionless face. Okay, I'm kidding. Lilith saw that Gu Shengyin ignored her, and trotted over from behind. Let me tell you something, she said mysteriously. Have you been to the underground coliseum in the south of the city? Underground coliseum? Gu Shengyin's eyes lit up. Lilith saw that she was interested, and said proudly, Brother Kyle got a few invitations. You know, it's hard to get tickets without connections. How about the 2nd of next month? Do you want to go with us? Gu Shengyin was, of course, willing. The underground coliseum was one of the darkest places in the king's city of Carter. It was open to the public once a month, and they would put carefully selected slaves and hand-raised magical beasts to duel, providing entertainment for the nobles. The top nobles of the empire would not like such a place, but they would not forbid their children from going there to broaden their horizons. Every warrior would yearn for a battle of blood and strength in their bones. Gu Shengyin was no exception. What's more, for the noble ladies who lived in comfortable castles, it was their nature to pursue excitement. Seeing Gu Shengyin nod, Lilith was very excited. Then it's a deal. It's a day off at the academy. We'll pick you up in the morning. Eve Heiss felt very tired. The man in the necklace seemed to be in a hurry. She spent almost all her time on the road except for eating and resting. Finally, she arrived at the king's city yesterday, but she was teased and teased by a group of noble youths. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore, and used the magic taught by the man in the necklace to hit one of them. She didn't expect to cause such a mess. That noble's son died on the spot. She had also been chased for an entire day and night, and only now did she have a moment to catch her breath. She leaned against the wall, leaning against the wall, and the man, She leaned against the wall. The man in the necklace said, "You've already shaken them off." Eve Heather was relieved. She still had a lot of faith in the ability of this mysterious sir. As soon as she relaxed, the fatigue in her body overwhelmed her, and she felt a little drowsy. "Someone's coming," a low voice said. Eve Heiss opened her eyes almost instantly. The alertness in her bones allowed her to react in an instant. "It's not the group that chased you." Eve curled up her body and hid in the corner. She looked no different from a beggar on the street. She hoped that these people would not notice her. But things didn't always go as planned. Chapter 68. Damn it. That little slave ran away. If we can't get him back today, we'll probably be slaughtered when we go back. A big man cursed. They were all guards of the underground Colosseum. During this time, they were preparing for the duel at the end of next month. Who would have thought that today, a little slave, who was used as a sacrifice, would break through layers of obstacles and run out? They were responsible for guarding. If they were found to have lost someone, the consequences would not be good. "Hey! Look!" One of them found Eve huddled in the corner. Another one instantly understood what he meant. Anyway, they were all slaves used as cannon fodder. As long as the number was right, no one would pay attention to what a slave looked like. "What are you doing? Let me go." Eve Taylor had never expected that this group of people would target her. "Boy, don't be nervous. We'll take you to a good place. I promise you'll eat and drink well." She would be obedient for a few days so that she could be the food for the treasure of the Colosseum. "Don't resist. Follow them." The mysterious man's voice suddenly came into Eve's ears. The mysterious man had his own considerations. He had lost a lot of strength. With Eve's skills, there was no way to escape from these people. It was better to follow them first. He could take advantage of this time to recover his strength. When the time came, he would have more confidence to take her away. Eve obediently quieted down. Those big men thought that their words had convinced the little beggar, and they exchanged a smile with each other. Soon, it was the second day. On this day, Gu Xingyin got up early to do morning exercises as usual, and then had breakfast with her parents. Soon after the meal, the housekeeper came and said that the carriage of the Bill family was parked outside the Duke's mansion. "Good day, Your Excellency the Duke." "Good day, beautiful Duchess." Lilith gave a standard salute to the Duke couple. Mrs. Roman's beautiful face was full of smiles. She liked such a warm little girl like Lilith. Sometimes, when she thought of her daughter and her husband's cold little face, she always felt sad. "Good day, Lilith. Did you come to see Arnika?" she asked in a gentle tone. Lilith looked a little reserved. "Yes, madam. We agreed to go out together today." "All right then, Nika. Are you ready?" "Don't keep your friend waiting too long," said the Duchess. "Mom, I'm ready," Gu Xingyin replied. They said goodbye to the Duke and his wife, and got into the carriage. When Gu Xingyin and Lilith could no longer be seen, the Duchess complained to her husband, "Look, it's all because of your cold face. Look at how scared the little girl is. What a sprightly girl she is, poor Lilith." The Duke looked at his wife helplessly. "Nana, you know I didn't do it on purpose." The Duchess winked mischievously. Then, the great Duke of White rose. "Why don't you smile?" "Duke," Lilith pulled Gu Xingyin into the carriage. "You scared me to death." Lilith patted her chest exaggeratedly. "Every time I see the Duke, I'm more scared than when I see the supervising elder." The supervising elder was the strictest old man in the Carter Royal Academy. He was in charge of student discipline in the academy. He always wore a meticulous black robe, and his wrinkled face always had a mocking expression. He was the last person the students wanted to see. Chapter 69. Gu Xingyin silently lit a candle for his father. He's such a handsome and charming duke, yet he's being compared to the supervising elder. She looked at Lilith seriously. "Don't talk about father like that. He is very good to people." Lilith silently imagined the interaction between Veronica and the Duke. The two expressionless people looked at each other and communicated with their eyes. She felt a little cold just thinking about it. Looking at her best friend's expressionless face, which had begun to show the trademark of the Duchess of White Rose, Lilith felt that she had a heavy responsibility. She wanted to change her best friend's personality, which happened to be the same as the Duchess. The carriage stopped at a place, and Lilith and Gu Xingyin got off the carriage. They saw two young men waiting on the side of the road on horses. One of them was Lilith's brother, Kyle Bill, and the other was his friend. Brother Kyle. Joey. Lilith ran over and greeted the two. This is my good friend, Veronica Roman of the Roman family. Both of them looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. They had heard of the Pearl of the Empire, but this was the first time they saw Gu Xingyin in person. Good day, Princess Roman. The two of them bowed to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin nodded and said, we are all friends here to play. There is no need to pay attention to these formalities. The sun shone on Gu Xingyin's face, making the girl's face even more dazzling. Along the way, Joey and Bill were extra attentive to Gu Xingyin. In their teens, the most straightforward way for these young men to recognize a girl was her appearance. We're here. The four of them didn't wear clothes embroidered with their family emblems. Gu Xingyin even wore a cloak. The green eyes of the Roman family were too unique and had to be covered. Bill handed the invitation letter in his hand to the gatekeeper and entered the Colosseum without any problems. Everything here seemed to be out of place in the king's city. Lilith and the others were amazed. The royal city in their eyes was filled with riches, prosperity, and a life of luxury. But here, the surrounding environment gave off a gloomy and damp feeling, and the people coming and going all had gloomy expressions. However, all of this made them even more excited. It was as if they were going on an exciting adventure in an unfamiliar place. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, had a bad premonition. Her intuition had always been accurate. In the previous world, when Qingyiru was taking revenge on the Qing family, she had the same feeling. Soon, this premonition was confirmed. The systems suddenly said, the underground Colosseum has found the existence of a plot character, Eve Heather. Gu Xingyin was surprised. Isn't it supposed to be 2 years before she comes to the capital? The system said, maybe the host's arrival changed the plot. Gu Xingyin suddenly remembered the cause of Veronica's death in the original plot. She suddenly said, is it too late for me to leave now? She didn't want to face the demon king who had lived for 10,000 years. Lilith and the others were puzzled by Gu Xingyin's sudden desire to leave, but seeing her insistence, they could only let her be. The gatekeeper of the Colosseum regretfully said that before the battle ended, all guests were not allowed to leave. Gu Xingyin's heart went cold. She couldn't force it. The only thing she could do now was to pray that the demon king would not discover her existence. Chapter 70. The demon king only felt that his heart was beating very fast, if he still had that thing. The feeling that had been with him since he woke up had become unprecedentedly strong after coming to the king's city, and today, it had reached its peak. He felt that his entire soul was trembling. He could feel that the thing he had been longing for was already in front of him. He was going to find her. Eve only felt that the necklace's heat was a bit scorching. Is that person all right? She thought uneasily. After all, in this strange place, that mysterious stranger was her only guarantee. Quick, quick, quick. You all move faster. The battle is about to start. Lord Barton has already finished warming up. It's time to put these little guys up. Eve had indeed been well taken care of by the people in the underground Colosseum these past few days, but she also understood where this place was. Don't worry, I will help you when the time comes. When it's chaotic, you can take the opportunity to quietly escape. The demon king comforted her. Soon, Eve and more than 10 youths of similar age were driven into a huge iron cage. At first, these youths were a little confused, but when they saw the huge iron cage, the bloodstains on the ground, and the excited spectators on the stands outside, a few of them suddenly understood where they were, and their expressions immediately became desperate. They wanted to escape, but the cage was already locked. This cage was made of special steel, and with just the few of them, it was impossible to break it. Roar! A huge roar came, and 4 big men appeared on the left side of the Colosseum. They were carrying a cage on their shoulders, and inside the cage was a huge tiger-type magical beast. Let us welcome the king of the King's City Underground Colosseum, the 6th-rank magical beast, Thunderwing Tiger. The host said loudly with an excited expression. The atmosphere of the scene was pushed to a climax. Many nobles waved the things in their hands, and their expressions were faintly crazy. In the iron cage, Eve's face suddenly became pale. At this time, even the slowest person understood their fate. At the same time, a person came out from the right side of the Colosseum. This man only had a simple cloth around his waist, and his whole body was muscular. He waved his hand at the audience. The audience screamed again. Let us welcome the hero of the underground Colosseum, Barton the Violent Lion. Barton. Barton. Gu Shengyin was a little surprised. Most of the people sitting here were nobles. She really did not expect that those nobles, who were usually well-dressed and well-mannered, would have such a crazy side. She took a closer look at Barton. He was a great swordsman, just like her. Gu Shengyin was a little surprised. With the cultivation of a great swordsman, he could find a decent and good job anywhere. Why would anyone want to come to a place where life and death were a constant threat? While Gu Shengyin was thinking, the huge thunder-winged lion had already been placed into the iron cage. Ah! Screams rang out, and the children all ran towards the furthest corner of the thunder-winged lion. However, this was of no use. The entire cage was only so big. A bloodthirsty look flashed across the thunder-winged lion's eyes. In a flash, it arrived in front of the nearest youth. Then, it opened its mouth, revealing its sharp teeth. Chapter 71. Eve Heiss was stunned. She could clearly feel the warm blood splattering on her face. She had never felt as close to death as she did now. What are you waiting for? The mysterious man's cold voice sounded in her mind. She came back to her senses and forced herself not to look at the broken body on the ground. She gritted her teeth and ran to the side. Gu Shengyin was stunned. She thought that the Colosseum was only a battle between magical beasts and warriors. She didn't expect that there would be such a one-sided massacre. The dozen or so youths in the cage had no room to fight back against the Thunderwing beast. It was insane. The people around seemed to be unaware of this. Gu Shengyin saw that many people were intoxicated because of this, and the atmosphere became more lively. Don't you think this is cruel? She asked. Lilith's face was pale. She was obviously frightened. Her brother, Kyle, looked at Gu Shengyin strangely. This is the usual practice of the Colosseum. Before the official battle, there will be a temporary warm-up. It is also to give the audience a thrill. Only blood and death can give people the most direct impact, isn't it? Gu Shengyin looked at Kyle, who was smiling gently, and said such cruel words casually. She felt a chill in her heart. She wanted to stop it, but the system warned her sternly, "Host, the Colosseum is a normal setting in the original plot. Host should not destroy it." Gu Shengyin could only give up. Her attention was also attracted by another figure in the cage. It was a skinny young man who was running around in the cage, dodging the sharp teeth of the Thunderwing beast time and time again. Gu Shengyin knew that it was Eve Heiss, the person who indirectly killed Veronica in the original plot. Eve only heard the mysterious man say in her mind, "Relax, don't resist." She did as she was told and realized that her body was actually out of her control. She could see that she was cleverly dodging the Thunderwing beast's attacks with her seemingly limping footsteps again and again. A mere Tier 6 reptile dares to be impudent in front of me. The mysterious person snorted coldly, the disdain in his tone not concealed in the slightest. Eve felt a surge of hot blood in her chest. Was this what it meant to be strong? Even a powerful magical beast like the Thunderwing beast was nothing more than a little worm in his eyes. Gu Shengyin looked at the scene. She was not worried about Eve Heather at all. With the Devil King, who had lived for 10,000 years, it would be difficult for her to die even if she wanted to. The Demon King in the field had a strange feeling. It was as if someone was watching him, and that person was the reason why he had been unable to calm down, the reason why he had been so eager to rush to the royal capital. His divine sense swept across the audience and quickly locked onto a place. There was a figure in a black cloak. His face could not be seen, but judging from his figure, he should still be in the growth stage of a human. The Demon King only felt that his soul was about to burn. He wanted to go to the figure's side and lift his cloak to see who it was that could affect him so deeply. There was only one survivor left in the field, and that was Eve Heather, whose body was being controlled by the Demon King. Every time people thought that she was about to be buried in the tiger's mouth, this small figure always managed to escape by the skin of her teeth. This could not go on. Sooner or later, the clues would be found out. The Demon King's expression turned cold. Chapter 72. In a place where no one could see, the eyes of the girl who was running for her life suddenly turned into a pure black color, as if an endless whirlpool was condensing in her eyes. When the thunder-winged lion met her eyes, its body suddenly stagnated for a moment. Then, it suddenly roared towards the sky and its body suddenly grew bigger. Oh no, that thunder-winged lion has gone crazy. The host suddenly panicked. As soon as he finished speaking, the cage made of secret steel was knocked open by the thunder-winged lion, who had lost all sense of reason. The thunder-winged lion went straight towards the audience. That place was filled with the underground Colosseum's distinguished guests, and there was no lack of distinguished guests. If anything happened, no matter how powerful the underground Colosseum was, there would be no small amount of trouble. Several figures flew towards the thunder-winged lion. They were the underground Colosseum's consecrators. These strong people were all supported by the underground Colosseum at a huge cost. Usually, there were very few opportunities for them to fight. But at this time, only they could suppress the thunder-winged lion. The thunder-winged lion was quickly subdued. But how could the Demon King let them off so easily? The little slave who had been lying on the ground with, no one knew if he was dead or alive, had a mysterious smile on his face. At the same time, the underground Colosseum was filled with the roars of magical beasts. The magical beasts were going crazy. Countless magical beasts ran out of their cages and bit everyone they saw. They were originally the overlords of the forest and grassland. But they were forcefully captured by these humans and sold to this place to fight for their lives for the entertainment of others. One could imagine the resentment in their hearts. The underground Colosseum was in a mess at this moment. The nobles were all pale and wanted to escape. But at this time, there were crazy magical beasts everywhere. If they were not careful, they could be bitten by the rioting magical beasts. Gu Shengyin and the rest walked together towards the exit of the Colosseum. Ah! A familiar voice was heard. Gu Shengyin looked back and saw a noble lady in red sitting on the ground. Beside her was a guard who was lying in a pool of blood. Obviously, he could no longer protect his master. Joanna could already smell the fishy smell coming from the magical beast's mouth. She closed her eyes in despair. However, the expected pain did not appear. She opened her eyes and saw a golden sword light cutting the demonic beast in half. Miss Raymond, is your magic staff just for decoration? Gu Shengyin sternly shouted at her. You. Xiao Anna looked at Gu Shengyin blankly. She did not expect that Gu Shengyin would save her. Get up, Miss Raymond. We don't have much time to waste on the ground. Xiao Anna stared blankly at the hand in front of her. She pursed her lips and stood up with Gu Shengyin's hand. She lowered her head and thanked Gu Shengyin. A faint smile appeared on Gu Shengyin's face, which was hidden under the cloak. In the original novel, Xiao Anna was not a bad girl. She was just a little girl who was spoiled by her family. When he saw her, he thought of Qing Shiji, the original host in the previous world. The original group of 4 became a group of 5 people. Fortunately, they were either warriors or magicians. The level of these crazy magical beasts was not too high. Finally, they arrived at the entrance of the Colosseum without any accident. Just when Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief, a small figure suddenly rushed towards her at a very fast speed. Chapter 73. Although the figure was extremely fast, that was only for ordinary people. For a great swordsman like Gu Xingyin, it was nothing. However, Gu Xingyin did not manage to dodge the seemingly slow collision. She took 2 steps back and was supported by Joanna, who was standing behind her. The cloak that had been covering her face fell off. However, the figure was knocked to the ground by the force of the collision. Gu Xingyin's expression changed. The figure was Eve Heather. The Demon King deliberately bumped into her. The cloaked figure looked like a noble. With Eve's identity, if she missed this chance, she did not know when she would meet her again. She could only think of a way. The moment Gu Xingyin's cloak fell off, the Demon King felt that his heart was in his mouth. He hated those dazzling colors the most, but he felt that the girl in front of him, with her long golden hair, was so charming. Her beautiful green eyes, and her delicate lips, no matter how he looked at it, she looked like someone from the light camp, which he hated the most. However, the Demon King only felt his heart beat when he looked at her. I fell into the trap of the goddess of love. The Demon King thought. He had lived for more than 10,000 years, and this was the first time he was moved by a human who looked so small. What reason should he find to follow her? The Demon King thought quickly in his heart, and from the corner of his eye, he saw a monster rushing towards them. Gu Xingyin watched as the tiny figure stood in front of him and was stabbed in the thigh by the armored rhinoceros. She opened her eyes wide in confusion. What is happening? The Demon King got what he wanted. The White Rose family's upbringing would not allow Gu Xingyin to ignore her savior. She brought the injured Eve Heather back to the Duke's mansion. When the Duchess saw her daughter come back with a person covered in blood, she was almost scared to death. She was only relieved after Gu Xingyin briefly explained to her. She was also very grateful to her daughter's benefactor. She personally arranged for Eve to stay in the guest's room and invited the most famous doctor in the palace to treat her daughter. Gu Xingyin was not in a good state at the moment. She looked at the strange man who suddenly appeared in her room with vigilance. "Who are you?" she asked coldly. Of course, Gu Xingyin knew who he was, but she never thought that the Devil King would appear so quickly. Could it be that he actually wanted to make a move in the Duke's mansion? She placed her hand on the protective enchantment in the space ring. Her godfather, the Archbishop of the Carter Empire, had personally set it up for her. The Demon King pretended not to see her little action. He just looked greedily at Gu Xingyin with an unfathomable smile in his eyes. What a cute little girl. Are you willing to sign a contract with me? Gu Xingyin called out to the system. This is different from the plot. Isn't it Eve Heather who signed the contract with him? The system was also confused. The Demon King saw Gu Xingyin's vigilance, and he was a little annoyed. In his heart, this little girl should not show such an expression to him. She should be looking at him with eyes full of trust and dependence, and her eyes were full of him. You have no other choice but to sign a contract with me. Otherwise, you can imagine the lives of the entire White Rose Duke's mansion. Chapter 74. Gu Xingyin knew how cruel the Demon King was, although she felt strange that he did not directly ask for her soul but wanted to sign a contract with her. The Demon King saw that Gu Xingyin agreed and was very satisfied. He called out to Gu Xingyin, "Come here." Gu Xingyin walked forward. The Demon King reached out an illusory hand and touched Gu Xingyin's forehead, his mouth chanting a mysterious rune. A black fog gushed out from the Demon King's mouth and slowly wrapped around Gu Xingyin's body. Gu Xingyin was surprised to find that the discomfort she imagined did not appear. She remembered that in the original plot, when Eve Heather and the Demon King signed a master-slave contract, it was very painful. The system said, "Of course you won't feel any pain. What you both signed just now was a symbiotic contract." Gu Xingyin said, "Oh, so that's how it is." "Wait, what did you just say? Symbiotic contract?" Gu Xingyin was really surprised. The symbiotic contract in this world was not a joke, it was just like its name, symbiotic. Both parties who signed the contract would be one body, You live and I live, you die and I die. Could it be that this demon king had misread the incantation? The demon king looked at the serious girl who was looking at him with a blank expression. Why? Gu Shengyin asked, why did you sign a symbiotic contract with me? She did not believe that the demon king would be so kind. The demon king held his chin. Maybe it's because you're too beautiful, I fell in love with you at first sight. Gu Shengyin's answer was to roll her eyes. Take it. A necklace flew into Gu Shengyin's arms. The necklace was a dark diamond-shaped crystal, the chain was made of an unknown material, it shone like stars. My soul is now living in this necklace, you have to take good care of it. Gu Shengyin would have taken good care of it even if he did not say anything. After all, their lives were connected, she had to cherish her own life, she still had to find her lover in the future. The Demon King's next action once again broke Gu Shengyin's understanding. Looking for the fountain of life? The Demon King nodded calmly. My physical body has long been burned to ashes. Now, only my soul remains imprisoned in this bright light chain. Naturally, I need the spring of life to nourish my soul and create a new body. Gu Shengyin was surprised again. System, didn't the Demon King to recover quickly by devouring the souls of the living? Why are you taking the moderate path now? System, there are too many illogical things in this world. The problem is that it can't find any reason. Seeing that the system remained silent, Gu Shengyin understood. This meant that the system could not answer her for the time being. Regardless, to Shengyin's the demon, it was a good thing. As a symbiotic contract for a symbiotic contract as a symbiosis contract to A, would not, as a symbiotic contract, she. When Eve woke up, the scene in front of her made her dizzy. She had never seen such a bright and beautiful room, and had never slept on such a soft and fragrant bed. The pain from her thigh told her that this was not a dream. Subconsciously, she reached out to grab the necklace on her neck. Unexpectedly, it was empty. Eve immediately panicked, she struggled to get up. Miss, you're awake? Is there anything I can do for you? The maid who heard the commotion and walked in was shocked to see Eve like this. Chapter 75. Where's my necklace? Did you see it? Eve asked anxiously. It's a black diamond-shaped necklace, about this big. She gestured. The maid was puzzled. We cleaned your body and bandaged your wounds, but we didn't see the necklace you mentioned. Eve's heart was cold. During this time, she had been used to relying on that mysterious lord. Now that he had suddenly disappeared, she felt empty in her heart. Your Highness. At this time, the maid suddenly bowed in a direction with a respectful expression. Eve looked up and was stunned for a moment. Other than that lord, she had never seen such a good-looking person. No, the two were obviously very different. That lord's appearance was like a seductive but fatal flower, tempting ignorant mortals to fall. But this lord was like the embodiment of God's light in the human world, beautiful, pure, noble and inviolable. Gu Shengyin asked the maid to leave, and she took out the necklace from the space ring. Eve's mind was immediately attracted. Eve. Black smoke gushed out from the necklace and turned into the handsome man in the air. Your Highness. Eve was happy. The Demon King did not say anything, and pointed at Eve's forehead. This is the way I promised you to improve your aptitude. Eve instantly understood what he meant. She was a little flustered. Your Highness, are you leaving? The Demon King looked at the expressionless Gu Shengyin and smiled deeply. I found the person I'm looking for. Eve glanced at Gu Shengyin and suddenly realized what was going on. At that time, the reason why the Demon King had been urging her to come to the king's city was because of this lord. Eve felt a little lost, but she also understood that the Demon King did not owe her anything. On the contrary, he had helped her a lot along the way. She was in no position to ask him to stay. Gu Shengyin spoke. Are you willing to stay in the Duke's mansion? She had her own selfish motives. After Eve Heather's talent had been modified, her talent could be said to be monstrous. If such a person were to become a member of the Duke's mansion, she would be of great help in the future. This was a pleasant surprise for Eve. When she first came to the royal city, she didn't know anyone and was worried about finding a place to stay. She agreed to Gu Xingyin's suggestion without much hesitation. The Demon King also made Eve swear an oath that she would not reveal anything about him to anyone. Although Eve didn't know who His Excellency was, she could tell from his appearance that he wasn't a simple character. She didn't object to this oath. It was better to avoid unnecessary trouble. She would bury His Excellency's existence in the deepest corner of her memory in the future. At night, Gu Xingyin came out of the shower and wiped her wet hair with a towel. "My dear, you smell so good." The Demon King took a deep breath, pretending to be intoxicated. Gu Xingyin was already used to his behavior. He couldn't touch her anyway. "Your Excellency Demon King, please conduct yourself with dignity." Because of the symbiotic contract, the Demon King's identity was not concealed. Gu Xingyin also doubted whether this person was her lover. But when she thought about her previous 2 lives, whether it was Ji Yu or Yuan Su, they were both overbearing and gentle. But the Demon King in front of her was clearly a frivolous old hooligan. Chapter 76. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, Gu Xingyin had graduated from Carter Royal Academy. It had been 3 years since she met the Demon King. There were countless treasures in the Duke's mansion. The Demon King's recovery speed was amazing. He could even transform into a real body for a short time. He just needed to find the spring of life and build a new body. Then, he could return to his peak strength. Today was the graduation ball of Carter Royal Academy. 3 years was enough time for Veronica to grow from a young girl to a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. She was the pearl of the empire. However, this beauty was too cold and arrogant. Her strength was too domineering. Gu Xingyin graduated from the Royal Academy as the top student in her year. The Carter Royal Academy even made an exception to create a statue for her in the academy. This was an honor that only those who had made great contributions to the academy could enjoy. There was only one reason for Gu Xingyin's statue to appear here: her talent was amazing. A 16-year-old legendary swordswoman. No one doubted that this girl would become another sword saint of the Carter Empire. Gu Xingyin was not interested in dancing. Except for the opening dance, she had been sitting there the whole time. This was the 10th person she had refused. Gu Xingyin knew that some bored noble boys must be betting on who could ask her out. "Nika." A pleasant male voice sounded. It was the second prince. The second prince, who was already an adult, was already a handsome man. He was wearing a white ceremonial robe that represented the royal family. The military uniform made his figure look even more tall and straight. It was unknown how many noble ladies' gazes were fixed on him. "You've broken the hearts of many men tonight," the second prince joked. Gu Xingyin glanced at him. There are also many girls who want to be the second prince's wife who are secretly sad. The second prince looked at Gu Xingyin, who was serious even when she was joking, and felt helpless. Then, "Beautiful Miss Roman, would you like to dance with me?" The second prince's expression was calm, but his expectant eyes betrayed his thoughts. Gu Xingyin shook her head. "Sorry." In the beginning, she had also suspected that it was the second prince, but after so many times of approaching him, she did not smell the familiar lotus fragrance from the second prince, nor did she feel the feeling that made her heart beat faster from him. Since there wouldn't be any results, she shouldn't give him any hope. The second prince left with a gloomy look in his eyes. Gu Xingyin ate the fruit alone. Suddenly, the aura around her changed. A certain demon king was sitting beside her. "Are you crazy? Show yourself here," Gu Xingyin shouted. Over the past 3 years, she and the Demon King had gotten along rather well. Although the Demon King she knew was a little thick-skinned, he wasn't as cruel and bloodthirsty as described in the plot. The Demon King would often teach her some swordsmanship or other things that had been lost on the continent. She was able to improve so quickly in 3 years because of the Demon King. The relationship between the two was like that of a teacher and a friend. In Gu Xingyin's heart, the Demon King was already someone she cared about. The Demon King coldly looked at the teenagers who were staring at Gu Xingyin. He casually replied, "Don't worry, these people won't be able to discover my existence." He really couldn't help it. His little girl was too charming, attracting too many wild bees and butterflies. Chapter 77. However, he did not know if it was because he had always acted too unreliable, but no matter what he said, Gu Xingyin only took it as a joke. Like now. The Demon King said, "So many little brats are thinking about you, how can I hold back?" Gu Xingyin's response was to ignore this sentence. The devil was a little angry. Veronica. A bright figure appeared in Gu Xingyin's vision. Joanna sat down beside her. Joanna had now grown into a young lady. She was tall and slender, and unlike Gu Xingyin's exquisite features, she had a beautiful face. She was like a blooming red plum, and there were many followers behind her. Joanna's attitude towards Gu Xingyin changed a lot since Gu Xingyin saved her from the demon beast 3 years ago. Although her words were still unforgiving, Gu Xingyin could feel Joanna's kindness towards him. Joanna looked at Gu Xingyin, who was leisurely eating fruit, with some envy. "I really envy you. You are the only successor of the Duke's mansion. You will never have my troubles." Gu Xingyin understood why Joanna was sighing. She was the youngest daughter of the Minister of Finance. Although she was very spoiled at home, she was a child of a noble family. When necessary, she had to contribute her own strength to the family. For example, marriage. Joanna's eyes were a little lonely. "My family has made a decision. If I can't win the heart of the second prince, next year, I will have to choose one of the noble sons to be my husband." Joanna of the Raymond family liked the second prince of the royal family. This was known in the noble circle of the empire. It was also an open secret that the second prince had been chasing after the heir of the White Rose family, Veronica Roman. Joanna Raymond and Veronica Roman were actually good friends, which made many people's jaws drop. Gu Xingyin thought for a long time and finally said, "There are plenty of fish in the sea. Joanna, you have to be more optimistic. Maybe your destined knight is waiting for you not far away." Joanna burst into laughter. She looked at Veronica's serious look, and the melancholy in her heart suddenly disappeared. Although he didn't quite understand the meaning behind Veronica's words, it was obvious that she didn't take the second prince seriously. She even had some malicious thoughts in her heart. "Second prince, look, you turned a blind eye to my sincerity. Now, your sincerity is nothing in Veronica's eyes. Is this what the priest meant by reincarnation?" Gu Xingyin didn't understand why Qiao Anna seemed to be in a good mood in an instant, but it was a good thing. Veronica's eyes looked around aimlessly. Suddenly, her eyes stopped at one place and couldn't move away. It was a man with long black hair. His hair was loosely tied up with a silver ribbon. His facial features were not as deep as the people of the Cat Empire. Instead, they were soft and gentle. He was standing there chatting with someone with a gentle smile on his face. Gu Xingyin was familiar with that face. She could draw that face with her eyes closed. It was Ji Yu's face in the first world. Joanna saw that Gu Xingyin's expression wasn't right. She followed her gaze and showed a knowing smile. "That's the army commander of the Sacred Alliance, Sir Lin Qi. He's a gentleman." Before she could finish, Gu Xingyin got up and walked over. Chapter 78. Joanna was a little dumbfounded. She had known Veronica for so many years, but she had never seen her so anxious. Could this be the legendary love at first sight? Gu Xingyin was so focused on looking for the person who looked exactly like Ji Yu that she didn't notice that the man she had forgotten had a dark expression on his face. Joanna felt a little cold for some reason. Gu Xingyin eagerly walked through the laughing crowd to look at the place where the man had appeared. Unfortunately, when she got there, it was already empty. Gu Xingyin felt lost. She turned to grab the hand of a noble lady and asked, "Where did the man who was standing here go?" "The one with black hair." The noble lady saw her and hurriedly bowed. After hearing her question, she chuckled and said, "Are you talking about Mr. Lin Qi? Someone was looking for him just now, and he left early." Gu Xingyin walked back in a daze. Joanna looked at her and teased, "What's the matter? You didn't see him? Don't tell me you fell in love with him at first sight?" She had just been joking. She hadn't expected Gu Xingyin to not deny it. Joanna was shocked. "Are you serious? The nobles of the Carter Empire who are chasing you can line up outside the capital. You actually fell in love with an outsider. If this was known by Hironika's suitors, wouldn't they be extremely depressed?" Gu Xingyin was a little uninterested for the rest of the night, so she didn't notice the devil's unusual silence. It wasn't until night fell that Gu Xingyin, who had just closed the door, was pressed against the door by a strong force. "You?" Gu Xingyin looked at the man who had imprisoned her with some surprise. The devil's expression was very bad, especially when he saw Gu Xingyin's confused look, which made him even angrier. Since he didn't know what to say, he had to take action. When the devil's kiss fell, Gu Xingyin was dizzy. What kind of development was this? Her confused expression probably pleased the Demon King, and the originally aggressive attack became gentle. The Devil King gently rubbed Gu Xingyin's lips and patiently coaxed, "Be good, open your mouth." Gu Xingyin's dizzy mind became clear because of this sentence. She struggled with all her might. "Let go of me." The Devil King's expression became gloomy again because of her resistance. He restrained Gu Xingyin's waving hands and no longer held back. The tip of his tongue opened her teeth and went straight in, kissing her thoroughly. By the time he loosened his grip, Gu Xingyin was already weak all over. However, in the next second, a golden sword beam lit up in the darkness. Although the Demon King's movements were fast, his face was still cut by the sword beam. "If there's a next time, I'll slit your throat." Gu Xingyin looked at him coldly. The Demon King didn't care about her words at all. He just looked at her and said, "Don't look at other men like that. I can't help killing him." Hearing this, Gu Xingyin glanced at him and said, "Then I'll kill you too." The Demon King smiled gently. "That's good. I'm willing to die with you." Gu Xingyin thought, "Damn the symbiotic contract." The dispute in the evening ended when the Demon King couldn't maintain his body. After several days, Gu Xingyin didn't see him again. On this day, Xiao Anna brought a message to Gu Xingyin, saying that there would be a banquet to welcome the guests of the Sacred Alliance in a few days. Gu Xingyin certainly wouldn't let go of this opportunity. Chapter 79. That day, Gu Xingyin specially dressed up and came to the banquet hall. She was a little excited, hoping that Lin Qi was the lover she had been looking for. But on the other hand, she felt a little guilty when she thought of the man in the necklace. Shaking off the inexplicable thoughts in her mind, Gu Xingyin found Lin Qi standing on the balcony with a glass of wine. "Why are you here alone?" "Sir Lin Qi." Gu Xingyin walked up to him. Lin Qi turned around when he heard the voice. The moment he saw Gu Xingyin, a trace of surprise flashed across his eyes. "Hello, noble Princess Roman." Gu Xingyin tilted her head slightly and asked curiously, "How did you know it was me?" Lin Qi smiled gently. Other than Princess Roman, known as the Pearl of the Carter Empire, who else would have this beauty that is favored by the gods? Gu Xingyin raised the glass in his hand and clinked it with him happily. Lin Qi looked at her mesmerizing blonde hair sliding down the side of her face. Her emerald green eyes were like a pool of clear water. This dreamlike beautiful woman suddenly cried out and fell in his direction. How could he refuse a beauty throwing herself at him? If Lin Qi had some doubts before, he was now sure that the Pearl of the Carter Empire had different thoughts about him. How could a legendary swordsman trip over his own dress? Lin Qi had a sense of pride that only belonged to men. He had long heard rumors about Princess Roman. She was often mentioned together with her beauty because she was as cold as ice. Now it seemed that the rumors could not be trusted. However, Gu Xingyin was very disappointed. Without that familiar smell, he was not him. Before Lin Qi could say anything, she stood up and tidied up her skirt. "I'm really sorry, Sir Lin Qi. I was rude just now," Gu Xingyin apologized. Lin Qi felt that the woman in front of him had changed in an instant. Just a moment ago, she was still chatting happily with him. Just as he was about to take the next step, she expressionlessly said goodbye. It was as if the hug just now was just a soft dream. Gu Xingyin was filled with disappointment. She just wanted to leave as soon as possible. She nodded at Lin Qi and turned around. He fell into a cold embrace. You. Gu Xingyin looked at the man who shouldn't have appeared in this place in shock. Darling, why didn't you tell me you were coming out? The man held her waist and lowered his head to whisper in her ear, but his voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone's eyes were on the two of them. After all, Gu Xingyin's family background and appearance made her the center of attention wherever she went. And a certain demon king was the only one who could compare to Gu Xingyin in terms of appearance. When the two of them stood together, they would definitely make everyone else look like dust. What do you want now? Gu Xingyin gritted her teeth and whispered, pulling the man outside. The man didn't resist and obediently followed her. In the eyes of outsiders, they were a perfect match, whispering intimately as they left. These people were all guessing who this mysterious man was. After all, with such an appearance and aura, it was impossible for him to be a nameless existence. Why are you here? And dressed like this? Gu Xingyin looked at him. The demon king said lazily, my future wife is going to leave with someone else. How can I sit still? Chapter 80. For the first time, Gu Xingyin looked at the man seriously. I have a lover, really? The demon king didn't believe it. Since she was 13 years old, he had always been the one by her side. But her tone was so certain. When she talked about her lover, even her eyes seemed to be shining. The demon king was silent. Just when Gu Xingyin thought he was going to give up, he suddenly said, Where's your lover? Gu Xingyin was speechless. After a while, she said, I'm looking for him. The demon king thought of Gu Xingyin and that man when he entered the banquet hall. So you threw yourself into the arms of that strange man today because you thought he was your lover? Gu Xingyin nodded. The demon king almost laughed. You don't even know what he looks like. How can you be so sure that he is your lover? Gu Xingyin didn't want to talk to him. She couldn't tell anyone about this. Even if she told them, no one would believe in something as strange as time travel. The demon king didn't give up. Then why are you looking for him? Let me guess. You mistook him for someone else, so it shouldn't be because of his appearance. Then, is it because of his smell? Or a mark on his body? Or is it some kind of mysterious but not mysterious special feeling? Gu Xingyin thought that he had guessed 80 to 90% of the time. At this moment, a cold and fragrant embrace covered her. A domineering kiss fell on Gu Xingyin's lips. The demon king's kiss was irresistible. Then feel it carefully. Is your lover me? Gu Xingyin pushed him away. Enough. I'm very sure that it's not you. After that, she left without looking back. Your Excellency. The demon king turned around. It was Eve, who looked surprised. Eve's life in the Duke's mansion was good. In the past 3 years, she had grown a lot taller and was a beautiful girl. Is it really you? Eve trotted over. Have you recovered? The demon king shook his head. It's only temporary. Eve looked at him. She had a lot to say, but she couldn't say a word. You saw everything? The demon king suddenly asked. Eve nodded. She saw His Highness push him away, but His Highness didn't see it. When she turned to leave, the man's cynical smile disappeared, and his expression was so sad. Then help me keep an eye on her, the man suddenly said. What? Eve was confused. After a while, I'll be going out. Don't let other men get close to her while I'm away. Eve nodded. Gu Xingyin had been feeling strange for the past 2 days. She always felt that something was missing from her side. It was not until Xiao Anna mentioned what happened that day that she realized that the Devil King had not appeared for several days. Could it be that she was angry with him? Gu Xingyin couldn't help but shudder at the thought of an old monster who had lived for 10,000 years sulking. 2 days later, Gu Xingyin couldn't take it anymore. She decided to admit defeat first. However, no man appeared from the space ring. Gu Xingyin was keenly aware that something was wrong. She used her spiritual power and found that there was no trace of the man in the space ring. Did that man just leave quietly like that? Gu Xingyin didn't believe that the man would leave. However, after 1 or 2 days, 10 days, half a month, she was sure that the Devil King had really left. For some reason, Gu Xingyin, who should have been relieved, felt a little wronged. He left without even saying goodbye. Chapter 81. When the man was still there, she didn't think he was important. Even affected by the original plot, she wanted to stay away from him. But now that the man really left, Gu Xingyin found that she wasn't used to it. When she practiced swordsmanship, there was no one to guide her step by step. There was no one to say that he liked her every day in a joking tone. She also didn't feel at ease because she knew that person would always be by her side. Gu Xingyin thought about it and felt that she was quite a scumbag. Since she couldn't respond to him, it seemed that it was good that the Demon King left her. In the blink of an eye, half a year passed. In the past 6 months, Gu Xingyin focused on practicing and improving her strength. She even lost interest in finding her lover. Speaking of which, this world really didn't have any pressure. The original Veronica Roman's soul was forcibly extracted by the Demon King because he fancied her. But according to Gu Xingyin's understanding, it was impossible for the Demon King to do such a thing. Eve Heather, who was originally a cannon fodder, had also become a female guard of the Duke of White Rose's residence. Then she just needed to be at ease as Veronica Roman and live out her life in this world according to the original plan. Thinking about it, Gu Xingyin suddenly felt a pain in her heart. It was as if someone had cut out a piece of flesh from her heart with a knife. It was the symbiotic contract. The moment she bent down, Gu Xingyin understood the source of the sudden pain, the symbiotic contract she signed with the Demon King. Then, this meant that the Demon King was in danger. Gu Xingyin almost immediately panicked. She closed her eyes and slowly felt the location of the Demon King. After a long time, Gu Xingyin opened her eyes. She found her destination, the Starlight Forest in the south of the Carter Empire. The elves, known for their beauty and fighting skills, lived there. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and understood the Demon King's idea. He should want to get the spring of life that the elves had guarded for generations to reconstruct his body. The two of them had reached an agreement on this matter. When Gu Xingyin became a sword saint, they would go to the Starlight Forest to obtain the spring of life. She didn't expect that this man would go alone without saying a word. Gu Xingyin felt a little helpless, but she didn't delay. After reporting to her parents, she stepped on the road to the Starlight Forest. No matter what, she could not sit back and watch her man fall into danger. The Demon King's current situation was indeed not very good. After all, he was the Demon King who once reigned over the entire continent. Even though he no longer had his physical body, his realm was much higher than the current elf king. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to sneak into the elf tribe's forbidden area. As long as he could find the spring of life and bathe in it for 7 days, with the strength of his soul, he would be able to grow a new body. However, he underestimated the power of the fountain of life. Perhaps, it should be said that he had overestimated the spirit body's endurance. In this secret technique, a lot of supplementary materials were needed to reconstruct the body. However, the Demon King had always thought highly of himself. He believed that those who needed these external materials were not strong enough, so he disdained them. Now, he suffered because of his arrogance. When the spring of life washed over him, the Demon King felt as if his soul was being roasted in a raging fire. The pain was indescribable. However, this wasn't a big deal. The crux of the matter was that the formation he had set up earlier to deceive others had shattered because of the soul fluctuations being too great. Almost all the elves felt the movement from the forbidden area. Chapter 82. The Elven King was instantly enraged. The spring of life had always been the Elven tribe's most important treasure. Even the Elven tribe could not easily enter its location. Now, an outsider had actually broken in and caused such a huge commotion. The Demon King felt the elf race's actions, but he couldn't say anything. He was at a critical moment, so he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. If the elf race attacked him, when the king of elves arrived with his people, he saw a translucent figure sitting in the spring of life that was emitting a faint green glow. It was a spirit. The elf king glanced at the spring of life and couldn't help but feel distressed. According to this loss, it would take decades to recover. He was about to order his subordinates to attack when the spirit in the spring suddenly said, "I came here by accident. As you can see, I'm already sitting here. If I come out now, you've already lost everything and can't make up for it. Why don't you let me stay here for 7 days? I can swear that when I come out, I'll tell you about the Tree of Life." When the words, "Tree of Life," came out, all the elves present became excited. The elf king was no exception. His snow-white long eyelashes trembled as he asked suspiciously, "Outsider, you really know about the Tree of Life?" The man in the spring lazily said, "I can swear to the light god that if I lie, I'm willing to accept the punishment of the god." For all the creatures on this continent, swearing to the god was the most sincere oath. The elf king believed him. "Then we can make an exception and let you stay in the spring of life for 7 days. After 7 days, I'll bring my people here to wait for you." The elf king finished and prepared to leave. At this moment, something strange happened. The originally calm spring of life suddenly trembled violently. The spirit in the spring had his eyes closed and was unaware of the situation around him. It was obvious that he had lost consciousness. The elves were surprised by the change in the spring of life when a strange smell suddenly swept through the forbidden area. It was like the fragrance of a certain flower. The elves, who had always been known as nature's favorites, couldn't tell what kind of plant it was. "Look!" An elf suddenly pointed at the man in the spring and exclaimed. Countless white flowers suddenly bloomed around the spirit body in the spring water. The flower was very large with layers upon layers of petals. It was beautiful but not bewitching, gorgeous but not extraordinary. It carried a dignified and noble beauty. It turned out to be a species that the elves had never seen before. The previous fragrance was obviously coming from here. At the same time, on the left shoulder of the man with his eyes closed in the spring water, a mark slowly appeared as if it was seeping out from his skin. It was the appearance of the unknown flower. The elves were stunned by this change. They could clearly sense that the moment these strange flowers appeared, the vitality of the entire spring of life suddenly increased by countless times. At this moment, the man in the spring opened his eyes. What kind of eyes were those? At first glance, there was only endless coldness and emptiness inside. At a second glance, it turned into endless vitality and reincarnation. When he looked at her again, his eyes were filled with compassion and compassion. All the elves could only think of one word when they saw such a look in his eyes: God. Chapter 83. Gu Shengyin arrived at the Starlight Forest without stopping. The closer she got, the stronger the symbiotic contract felt. Obviously, she was very close to the Demon King. However, ever since she felt the pain in her heart, she no longer felt this uncomfortable. Thinking about it, the Demon King's crisis had been resolved. After all, he was an old monster who had lived for tens of thousands of years. How could something happen to him so easily? However, thinking about it was just thinking. Without seeing him in person, Gu Shengyin was still worried. The Starlight Forest was full of danger. Although the elves loved nature, they were not very friendly to humans, especially those who trespassed into their territory. Just the endless monsters and plants in the forest were enough to stop the average person. However, Gu Shengyin, who had the system, obviously did not belong to the category of average person. It was already night. Gu Shengyin chose a safe place to rest for the night. She closed her eyes and chatted with the system. System, do you think you will be reincarnated with me in this world? The system, unable to find the target's information. Unable to answer the host's question. With Gu Shengyin as its host, the system had to say that it had gained a lot of knowledge. All kinds of things that had never happened before were now normal around Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin, I don't know why, but my desire to find him in this world is not that strong. Before she finished speaking, Gu Shengyin's face suddenly changed. She could feel that her dou qi in her body was increasing at a terrifying speed. It was completely out of her control. This was the power of the symbiotic contract. What did the Demon King do? How could it increase her strength so much? Gu Xingyin's mind gradually became absent-minded. Her spiritual energy was somewhat unable to control the speed of the dou qi in her body. If this continued, she did not know what would happen. Boom! Gu Xingyin felt something shatter. Her consciousness also fell into a deep sleep. At the same time, not far from here, in the elves' territory, the black-haired man opened his eyes. A dark light flashed across his eyes, and his figure moved, disappearing on the spot. As soon as Gu Xingyin regained her consciousness, she fell into a familiar lotus fragrance. She sniffled nostalgically and moved her head. Only then did she realize that she was in a familiar embrace. "You're awake?" A deep voice with a smile sounded. The Demon King looked at the person in his arms who was rubbing against his chest like a Siamese cat. This voice? Gu Xingyin opened her eyes and saw a smiling face. Gu Xingyin blinked, then blinked again. That's right, this familiar face. Demon King? The man laughed and leaned over to kiss her on the cheek. You're not mistaken, my dear, it's me. Gu Xingyin sniffed. The smell was right. So, the lover she had been looking for was actually the Demon King? She looked at the man's neck. The Demon King was wearing a black robe. Gu Xingyin reached out her hand. Rip. Gu Xingyin never thought that the fabric would be so fragile. She looked at the man seriously and said expressionlessly, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Although she said that, her eyes could not help but look below the man's neck. Sure enough, she saw the familiar lotus mark. The man did not care whether she made a mistake or not. I didn't expect my dear to be so enthusiastic when you wake up. I can't neglect a beauty. A hot kiss immediately covered her mouth. Chapter 84. Because she had confirmed that he was her lover, Gu Xingyin did not refuse. Her acquiescence made the Demon King ecstatic. For a moment, the two of them were unable to restrain themselves. After the kiss, Gu Xingyin fell into the man's arms, gasping for breath. Her white skin was dyed red and her green eyes were soft like spring water. This appearance made the man almost unable to restrain himself. The Demon King kissed the treasure in his arms. What, you're not going to find your lover? He deliberately said. Gu Xingyin took the initiative to give her lover a kiss. You are my lover. Feeling the familiar hard thing on her thigh, Gu Xingyin secretly laughed, but her expression did not change. This man had always treated her so carefully. Even after confirming their relationship in the previous 2 worlds, no matter how hard he endured, he did not touch her before they got married. Because that man had said to her, you are the most precious treasure in this world, I can't have you so carelessly. The Demon King kissed the top of her head and suddenly said, feel the changes in your body. Gu Xingyin did as she was told. I actually broke through to Sword Saint. She was in disbelief. This was Sword Saint, the peak power of an empire. The Demon King said with a smile, I have reconstructed my body and my strength has returned to its peak. With the symbiotic contract, it is not strange for you to break through to Sword Saint. If it wasn't for the fact that you are too young and can't withstand another breakthrough, it would be more than this. His words were full of regret. Gu Xingyin did not know whether to laugh or cry. A 16-year-old Sword Saint expert, you can't be too greedy. The Demon King thought about it and agreed. In any case, he would always be by her side, so Sword Saint was enough. That's right, where is this? Gu Xingyin realized that she was in a strange place. This is the residence of the elves. The Demon King replied. Gu Xingyin was amazed as she looked around. The decorations here were not as gorgeous as the Duke's mansion, but in terms of delicacy, the Duke's mansion could not compare. Let's go, I'll take you to the elves' territory to have a look. The Demon King held Gu Xingyin's hand and walked outside. The elves were indeed a race favored by nature. The elves that Gu Xingyin saw along the way, regardless of whether they were male or female, old or young, were all rare beauties in the human world. However, Gu Xingyin always felt that it was very strange. When these elves saw the two of them, they all had expressions of awe and even worship. She was not narcissistic enough to think that these emotions were because of her. She voiced her doubts. The Demon King replied casually, "About that, I only told them about the Tree of Life. You know, if you live longer, you will know more than others." He hid what happened to him in the spring of life. It wasn't that he was trying to hide it, but that even he was unable to explain the situation. Gu Xingyin's mouth twitched when she heard the Demon King's answer. However, she also understood why the elves were so friendly to them. The Tree of Life was the divine tree of the elves. It was said that every elf was born from the Tree of Life, and when the elves died, their souls would be taken away by the Tree of Life, waiting for their next rebirth. The Tree of Life of the elves suddenly disappeared thousands of years ago, which caused the elves to not have any new elves for thousands of years. Although a few thousand years was not a particularly long time for the long-lived elves, it was undeniable that without new blood, the elves would eventually die out one day. Chapter 85. There was a lively event in the White Rose Duke's mansion recently. Have you heard? Her Highness brought a man back from her training. Of course, I also saw him. TSK, he's really good looking. He's a good match for our Highness. I just don't know who he is. After all, our Highness is the next Duke of White Rose. His daughter went out for training and came back with a lover. Even though Duke Richard was mentally strong, he felt a little confused when he heard the news. The Duchess was very satisfied with the man her daughter brought back. The Devil King was handsome and knew how to please people. In less than a day, he coaxed the Duchess into smiling when she saw him. The Devil King knew people's hearts well and knew what countermeasures to take for each person. It took him less than half a day to win the Duchess' favor. And it took even less time to win the Duke's approval. The process was simple. He and Duke Richard had a fierce fight in the martial arts field of the Duke's mansion. The Devil King, who had won the approval of the Duke couple, did not slack off. He could not live in the Duke's mansion with his baby. Even if Gu Xingyin did not care, there would definitely be all kinds of rumors. He could not bear to let his baby be wronged. So, half a month later, the Emperor of the Carter Empire proudly announced to all his ministers that the Empire had one more sword saint expert and personally conferred him the title of Earl. When the opponents of the White Rose family were laughing at their heir's taste in choosing a partner, the Devil King used practical actions to tell them what it meant to be slapped in the face. The following days were the time for Her Highness Roman and the new Earl Norman to show off their love. When you went out to watch an opera, you could inadvertently look up and see Her Highness Roman sitting there, and Earl Norman was carefully picking out the ingredients she did not like for the snacks in front of her. At the palace banquet, as long as a man appeared beside Her Highness Roman, Earl Norman would immediately appear beside his fiancée and hold her waist possessively to declare his sovereignty. Do you think Her Highness will be unhappy? Take a look. Who is that woman with a sweet smile on her face? People who lived in the capital would often see Her Highness and Count Norman strolling together on the streets. Because Her Highness did not like to be followed by servants, Count Norman, a noble count and sacred swordsman expert, would carry the trinkets that Her Highness took a fancy to along the way without complaint. This directly led to the unmarried ladies of the royal capital looking up to Count Norman when they were choosing their future husbands, leading to the birth of a batch of older, leftover women. As for the married ladies, they would complain to their husbands about how considerate and attentive Norman was to his fiancée. They were both women, but why was there such a huge difference between them? This anecdote was called the Earl Norman effect by later historians. Eve was now a captain of the Duke's private guards. As she watched the interaction between His Highness and the Count, she would sometimes fantasize. If she was the one who had always stayed by the Count's side back then, would she be the one by his side now? Captain. Eve turned around. It was one of her guards. It was said that he was also from a small noble family. His family used to be a viscount. Eve looked at him suspiciously. The guard's face flushed red. After a while, he said, "Our family will have a bonfire party tomorrow night. Do you want to go with me?" Eve looked at him seriously and suddenly smiled. Okay. It was time for her to pursue her own happiness. Chapter 86. Veronica Roman, the 11th Duchess of the White Rose, had lived a glorious life. Her talent was incredible. At the age of 16, she successfully became a sword saint. This record had not been surpassed by anyone, even tens of thousands of years after her death and after the Carter Empire had been annihilated in the dust of history. She was invincible. She led the White Rose army of the Carter Empire and was invincible. In her lifetime, she had doubled the territory of the Carter Empire. She was conferred the title of Honorable Duchess by His Majesty, and her scepter was engraved with the noblest titles of the two empires. She had a discerning eye. Eve Heather, who was known as the Genius Sword Saint, was discovered by her when she was down and out. She brought her to the Roman family and started Eve Heather's glorious journey. Her appearance was beautiful. It was recorded in the history books that Princess Veronica was the incarnation of God in the world and the messenger of light. Anyone who saw her would be impressed by her appearance and temperament. During her reign, her suitors could line up from the Duke's mansion to the gate of the capital. However, the most popular topic of conversation was still the unswerving love between the Duchess and her husband, Count Norman. Earl Norman's origin was mysterious. The first time he appeared in the public eye was as the lover of the Duchess, a sword saint. Ever since the two of them were together, they had never been separated. Whether it was playing, going on diplomatic missions, or war, Earl Norman would appear wherever the Duchess of White Rose was. It was said that the two of them had signed a symbiotic contract. They would live together and die together. The love between the two of them was written in countless biographies and spread widely in later years. Gu Xingyin was very happy in this life. When she left, she already had feelings. She, who was no longer young, held her husband's hand and smiled sweetly. I'll go first. In the next life, remember to come and find me. The black-haired, black-clothed, handsome man looked at his wife, who was sleeping peacefully with her eyes closed. He gently leaned over and kissed her lips. Fool, have you forgotten the contract between us? You don't have to go first. I'm right behind you. Gu Xingyin opened her eyes in the pure white space with a smile on her face. She didn't stop smiling and said to the system in front of her, I don't have any problems and I don't need to rest. We can move on to the next mission. She was very sure that her lover would be waiting for her in another world, so she didn't want to stay in a place without him. This was the system's first time meeting a host who couldn't wait to complete a task. However, as long as the host's decision was beneficial to completing the mission, as a system, it had no right to interfere. The next world is the immortal cultivation world. Host, please check the world's information. Gu Xingyin's vision turned black. After the familiar dizziness disappeared, she found herself kneeling in a large hall. She lowered her head and looked at her hand. It was thin and soft. It was obviously a little girl's hand. There were hundreds of children kneeling in the hall. They were dressed similarly to Gu Xingyin, and they all looked about 7 or 8 years old. Since you're able to enter this hall today, you're disciples of my Starnet Sword sect. However, being able to enter this hall only proves that your foundation is suitable for cultivation. As for sword cultivation, the most important thing is the sword heart in your body. Now, let's start testing your sword heart. The level of your sword heart will determine how far you can go on the path of sword cultivation. Chapter 87. Gu Xingyin quietly knelt in the hall. Her face was calm, unlike other children. One by one, the children walked to the front and stood in a specific place. Gu Xingyin knew that there was a special formation there. When people stood in it, they would show different reactions. Lin Yisheng, Wood of the 5 Elements, Level 3 Sword Heart. Can enter the outer sect. A misty green halo appeared in the formation, and the elder reported the level of his sword heart. Lan Yingyue, Water of the 5 Elements, Level 5 Sword Heart. Can enter the inner sect. Gu Xingyin listened quietly as the elder reported the numbers one by one. In this world where the sword was revered, the sword heart determined whether a person could become a swordsman. At the same time, it determined how far a swordsman could go on the path of the sword. The sword heart was divided into 3 levels. The low-level sword heart was level 1, level 2, level 3. The medium-level sword heart was level 4, level 6. The high-level sword heart was level 7, level 8, level 9. The higher the level of the sword heart, the higher the talent in the path of the sword, and the higher the compatibility with the life-bound sword. However, although the sword was revered in the endless sky great world, only 1 in 10,000 people could become a swordsman with a sword heart. As the largest sword sect in the endless sky great world, the Starnet sword sect standards for selecting disciples were naturally much higher than ordinary sections. At this moment, the hundreds of children in the hall had all passed the basic test, and all of them had a sword heart. At this moment, a girl not far from Gu Xingyin stood up. She attracted Gu Xingyin's attention. This girl was the target of Gu Xingyin's mission in this world. Bai Xinya was born in a middle-class family in the endless sky great world. Her mother was the concubine of that family's head, but she was rather doted on. Bai Xinya had lived a life of luxury since she was young. The biggest blow she had suffered was probably the Star Azura sword sect's recruitment of new disciples this time. Bai Xinya, water element, level 1 sword heart, can join the outer sect. Bai Xinya's eyes were wide open, as if she had never imagined that her sword heart was only at the first level. She seemed to be at a loss of what to do. Her big eyes were quickly filled with tears, making her look very lovable. The elder beside her seemed to have rarely encountered such a situation. Seeing Bai Xinya like this, the usually strict sword cultivator actually softened his voice, which was rare for him. He coaxed her, "Don't worry too much about it. As long as you cultivate diligently, it's not like there aren't any swordsmen who become strong in the end despite their low level of sword heart." Gu Xingyin found it a little strange. She asked doubtfully, "I already know the plot." Bai Xinya's talent is obviously very ordinary, and her looks are not peerless. Why would there be so many men willing to offer everything just to make her happy? Moreover, no matter how cold and ruthless a person is, there is no way to be fierce in front of her. The system was suspiciously silent for a moment, then replied, "Host, you may not know, but in this world, there is something called the White Lotus Halo." Before Gu Xingyin had time to be popularized as to what this White Lotus Halo was, she heard her name. Gu Weixin. She stood up slowly and walked to the center of the array with a calm expression. The elder in charge of the test also looked at her curiously. The children who were brought here were generally 7 or 8 years old. When they came for the test, they were either uneasy or eager to try. It was rare to see someone as calm as Gu Xingyin. Chapter 88. Gu Xingyin did not pay attention to what the elder was thinking. Her body was called Gu Weixin, and she was a direct descendant of a super family in the sky below great world. The children of these families always matured earlier than others, so no one would doubt her calmness. Moreover, no one knew Gu Weixin's aptitude better than Gu Xingyin. Icy heart clear, advance courageously. 10th level ice soul sword heart. As soon as the elder finished speaking, everyone in the hall, except for the children who were still in a daze, looked at Gu Xingyin in unison. In addition, there were several powerful spiritual senses from all over the star-gathering sword sect that descended on Gu Xingyin's body. The elder in charge of Gu Xingyin's test seemed very excited. He looked like he wanted to laugh, but his long years of expressionless face made his whole face somewhat distorted. He did not say where Gu Xingyin could be assigned, but let her stand alone on the other side to wait. Gu Xingyin still walked to the side with a calm expression. The elder looked at her and thought to himself that this girl probably did not understand what a 10th level sword heart represented. Otherwise, how could she be so calm? How could Gu Xingyin not know? The sword heart was divided into 10 levels, and the 10th level was the highest quality sword heart. This body's aptitude was the 1 in 10,000 10th level sword heart, and even rarer was the rarely seen ice soul sword heart. According to the 5 elements, the ice soul sword heart should belong to water, but it was mutated from the water element. A mutated sword heart could not only make a swordsman's attacks more powerful, but even rarer, it would carry some characteristics that the 5 elements did not have. For example, if the Ice Soul Sword Heart was cultivated to a high level, the sword intent could freeze thousands of miles. And the power of the Ice Soul Sword Heart did not stop there. Its greatest characteristic was that the ice heart was clear, otherwise it would be dust. In other words, Gu Weixin's path of the sword would not be entangled by mental demons. The greatest obstacle to a sword cultivator was mental demons. With Gu Xingyin in front of her, everyone else's brilliance was overshadowed. Even though there were several talented disciples with high-level sword heart, the higher-ups of the Star-Gathering Sword School still focused on Gu Xingyin. There was no other reason. Ordinary high-level sword heart swordsmen might be able to become sword emperors, sword venerables, or even sword masters through diligent cultivation. However, if one wanted to become a peak sword saint, one had to have a 10th-order sword heart. Sword emperors, sword venerables, and even sword grandmasters, the Star Azura Sword School had no lack of them. However, even with the Star Azura Sword Sect's foundation, they only had 2 sword saints. One of them had already lived for a very long time and had been in seclusion for many years. Only the upper echelons of the sword faction knew that the Great Elder was on the verge of death. And these 2 sword saints were the guarantee of the Star Azura Sword Sect's position. Therefore, the current Star Azura Sword Sect urgently needed a new sword saint powerhouse to stabilize their position. Gu Xingyin stood among the elders and watched as the hundreds of disciples were assigned to different sects one by one. Those with excellent sword heart aptitudes were accepted as personal disciples by the main peak elders. In the end, only she was left. She stood there quietly and did not speak. In the eyes of others, she was born with the bearing of a master. In reality, Gu Xingyin was only listening to the system's so-called White Lotus halo. As expected, powerful. Gu Xingyin exclaimed. No wonder with the original body's attributes that were like cheating, she would also be defeated by Baixinya. Chapter 89. The voice of the system sounded in Gu Xingyin's mind. The so-called White Lotus halo, anyone who is illuminated by this halo will lose the ability to judge, the infinite beautification of the halo owner in the mind. The original body Gu Weixin, I have to say, can be called perfect in all aspects. Family background needless to say, the Gu clan is a top family in the whole Tianlan continent. Talent needless to say, the 10th order Ice Soul Sword Heart has the potential to become a sword saint. Even her appearance is described in the original plot. She stands there, like the most cold and flawless ice and snow on the holy mountain in the north. Autumn water is the god, ice jade is the bone. And if she smiles gently, it is like 10 miles of spring breeze, melting ice and snow, blooming flowers, and her face is frightening. However, she was such a perfect woman in every aspect, yet the first man she fell in love with decisively abandoned her after seeing Baixinya. What's more, when Baixinya was injured by the fire poison, the man didn't know where to find out that as long as he used the blood of the heart of the person who had the Ice Soul Sword Heart, he could detoxify the fire poison. He even relied on Gu Weixin's trust to drug her and forcibly took out her heart blood. Poor Gu Weixin's realm was greatly reduced, and he encountered the invasion of the demon clan. He even lost his life. I don't kill Boren, but Boren died because of me. However, the man didn't care about his own sins at all. He only cared about love with Baixinya. Baixinya didn't even ask how her poison was detoxified. She was with a man with a clear conscience. Gu Xingyin sneers, the fire poison is incurable except for the blood of the heart of the person who has the Ice Soul Sword Heart. In the whole Tianlan continent, only Gu Weixin is the Ice Soul Sword Heart. It's impossible to say that Baixinya doesn't know who saved her. However, she can ignore this question and never ask. Even when she learned about Gu Weixin's death, she didn't say anything. It's really a pure and flawless white lotus. While Gu Xingyin was absent-minded, all the elders in the hall were arguing over who to accept Gu Xingyin as their disciple. Who wouldn't want to take in a 10th-tier sword heart that was hard to come by in 10,000 years? However, before they could come to a conclusion, a message from the most distant and mysterious mountain of the Star Azura Sword Sect stopped the discussion. The elder ancestor who had been in seclusion for many years and no longer cared about worldly affairs actually came out of seclusion in person and said that he wanted to take Gu Xingyin as his disciple. With that ancestor taking action, the others naturally did not dare to have any objections. The star-gathering sword sect Star River sect master personally led Gu Xingyin to the ancestors' Ling Shao Peak. Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. There was no such thing in the original plot. Gu Weixin was finally accepted as a personal disciple by Zhenren Xinghe and became the first disciple of the Star Luo sword sect. If he became the disciple of the ancestor who had been in seclusion for many years, wouldn't his seniority be much higher than that of the leader? Gu Xingyin secretly hesitated. Thinking of the Devil King in the last world, he couldn't help but have another guess in his heart. Could it be that the legendary ancestor would be his lover? In this way, it makes sense that it's different from the original plot. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but have a little expectation in his heart. Ling Shao Peak was located in one of the most remote places in the star-gathering sword sect. Few people came to disturb it on weekdays. The residence of the ancestor was on the top of the peak. In order to show his respect for the ancestor, Zhenren Xinghe took Gu Xingyin step by step to the top of the peak. Chapter 90. Lingshao Peak was 1,000 feet tall, and the distance from the foot of the mountain to the top was not short. However, just halfway up the mountain, Gu Xingyin could not hold on any longer. Although her natural aptitude was against the heavens, she was now only an 8-year-old child. Such a journey was too long for her. However, she did not have any slack or complaints. Zhenren Xinghe looked at the little girl with a calm face and followed him to the top of the mountain without saying a word. Even though her forehead was covered with sweat, Gu Weixin never cried out for exhaustion and proposed to rest. Zhenren Xinghe secretly praised her. Her aptitude was against the heavens, and her heart was tenacious. This girl was really a natural seedling for sword cultivation. At this moment, a crane cry came from the distant horizon. Gu Xingyin looked up and saw a beautiful white crane falling from the sky. At the same time, a voice like ice and jade colliding came from the red-crowned crane, "Come up." Gu Xingyin looked at the red-crowned crane with some novelty, but Zhenren Xinghe respectfully saluted the crane. "I will obey the orders of the great ancestor." After that, he held Gu Xingyin in one hand, tapped his toes, and landed lightly on the back of the white crane. The white crane gave a long cry, spread its wings, and flew towards the top of the mountain. The two of them stood at the top of the mountain, and the white crane that had just supported them flashed with white light, turned into a light paper crane, and disappeared. Gu Xingyin. The world of cultivation is really magical. At this moment, Elder Xinghe, who was standing beside Gu Xingyin, suddenly changed his expression and became respectful. After a long while, Elder Xinghe suddenly turned to Gu Xingyin and said, "The great ancestor has been in seclusion for many years and does not want to see strangers. I will not accompany you to see him this time." He told Gu Xingyin where the great ancestor was and left. Gu Xingyin. If it was really the 8-year-old Gu Weixin, at this time, he must be nervous and scared, right? She walked towards the cave abode that Sage Xing he had pointed out. Without a doubt, she had obtained the approval of the owner of the cave. Those terrifying restrictions set up in the cave did not react to Gu Xingyin at all. Gu Xingyin observed her surroundings as she walked. If Zhenren Xing he had not personally pointed the way, she would never have imagined that there was someone living in this place. There were no superfluous decorations in the cave, and the walls were bare. As she walked in, she saw a few simple futons on the ground. On the right, there was a large stone room with messy sword marks on the ground. Gu Xingyin only took one look at it, and she immediately felt a stinging pain in her eyes, as if her mind was being pricked by needles. She couldn't help but cry out in pain as cold sweat poured down like rain. "Calm your mind." The cold jade-like voice that was heard from the white crane appeared once again. At the same time, a hand was placed on Gu Xingyin's head. Gu Xingyin only felt that there was a cool air coming into her body from the hand on her head. The stinging pain was smoothed out one by one with this cool air and disappeared. She opened her eyes and looked at the man who looked very tall and straight for her at the moment. She saw the long hair that was like a waterfall. It was snow-white and long to her ankles. Under the long hair, there was a strange young face. Gu Xingyin saw such a person for the first time. He had the face of 20 years old, but the eyes of 100 years old. Of course, his real age was definitely more than this number. This ice and snow man leaned over to Gu Xingyin and said, "Would you like to worship me as a teacher?" Chapter 91. Gu Xingyin thought in a trance. Compared with Gu Weixin, this person is really made of ice and snow, isn't he? She took a step back with a serious face and made a formal salute to the man in white. "Disciple Gu Weixin, pay my respects to Shizuan." The white-robed man's expression softened for a moment, and he nodded at Gu Xingyin. "All right, remember, my name is Ling Xiao. You are my first disciple, and you will also be my last." Gu Xingyin lived in Lingxiao Peak from then on. The more time passed, the more she felt that her master Ling Xiao was not like a mortal. In addition to teaching Gu Xingyin, he never communicated with outsiders and did not need to eat. Even this Lingxiao Peak, before Gu Xingyin's arrival, had not allowed outsiders to set foot on it for thousands of years. It's really hard to imagine what kind of life this person has lived. Doesn't he feel bored? Half a year after coming to Lingxiao Peak, Gu Xingyin finally asked this question. Venerable Lingxiao was stunned for a moment. He was a good master. He would try his best to answer his apprentice's questions. Looking at the clear eyes of his little disciple, Venerable Lingxiao frowned, thought for a moment, and replied, "Bored? The way of the sword is broad and profound. Even if I spend my whole life, I can't find out 1/10,000th of the way. How can I be bored?" Gu Xingyin was silent. Everyone said that the great-granduncle of Lingxiao Peak was as cold as snow. He was inhuman. He was born to be a cold-hearted person and a born sword practitioner. Gu Xingyin thought that he was not cold-hearted, but had given all his thoughts and feelings to the way of the sword. If he didn't know that his time was coming and needed to cultivate a new sword master for the Star Sword sect, Gu Xingyin was sure that he would never propose to accept himself as a disciple. Venerable Lingxiao looked at his little apprentice who lowered his head and didn't speak. He thought for a moment and suddenly had a good idea. Is idealism bored? He thought for a moment. Children of this age were indeed fond of bustling. Ever since he was young, he had always been a loner and didn't like to talk to people, but he had forgotten that his disciple wasn't necessarily the same. Gu Xingyin was stunned by the question. She hadn't interacted with outsiders for the past 6 months, but it wasn't something that was unbearable. Venerable Lingxiao was a very good teacher. He was able to impart his understanding of the sword Tao to his disciple in the simplest way. Gu Xingyin benefited a lot from this. Before Gu Xingyin could react, Venerable Lingxiao made his decision. "I didn't think it through." "Gu Xingyin, what's going on?" "Master, what exactly are you thinking?" Soon, Gu Xingyin knew what Venerable Lingxiao was thinking. Every few days, a child about the same age as Gu Xingyin would be sent to Lingxiao Peak. They all had a common characteristic, and that was that their sword hearts were all above the 7th level. According to Venerable Ling Zhao's understanding, those with sword hearts below the 7th level were considered to be very weak. Gu Xingyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She knew that her master didn't mean to discriminate, but he thought so from the bottom of his heart. However, Venerable Ling Xiao found that his method didn't have the corresponding effect. Those children were like proud sons of the heavens on his peak and had always been served. When they came to Lingxiao Peak, there was nothing to say. There was also a cold and scary great ancestor. None of the children were willing to come a second time after the first time. After Venerable Ling Xiao was distressed for a while, he finally thought of a very suitable person. Chapter 92. When Gu Xingyin received a message from her master, she was practicing her swordsmanship on a flat area on Lingxiao Peak. When she arrived at her master's residence, she saw another man beside her master. This was the first time Gu Xingyin saw someone who could smile so naturally in front of her master. Only idealism, this is your. Venerable Lingxiao seemed to pause for a moment. You can call him senior brother. In the future, your senior brother will accompany you. The man turned around. Gu Xingyin would remember it for a long time. The man had his head lowered, and the fragrance of lotus flowers wafted over his face. His jade-like face was full of gentleness. You're called idealism, right? I'm Xuanke, your senior brother. Gu Xingyin's heart settled down amidst this fragrance. Xuanke? If her memory was correct, this Xuanke was the other sword saint expert of the stellar sword sect? Unlike Venerable Lingxiao, Xuanke could be considered young among sword saints. He was not even 1,000 years old. In terms of seniority, Xuanke was the last disciple of Venerable Lingxiao's senior brother, so it was natural for Gu Xingyin to call him senior brother. Let a sword saint expert play with her? Gu Xingyin felt that he was indeed worthy of being her master. In the entire endless sky great world, there were few people who could compare to him. Xuanke looked at the beautiful little girl looking at him with a sparkling face, and his heart could not help but soften a little. In the following days, Xuanke would come to Lingxiao Peak from time to time. Occasionally, he would give Gu Xingyin some pointers, but most of the time, he would bring her some trinkets from the outside world, or tell her some interesting stories about the stellar sword sect. 10 years passed just like that. The only thing that made Gu Xingyin somewhat helpless was that her lover in this life seemed to have always regarded her as a little girl who had not yet grown up. It could be seen that he did not have the slightest bit of romantic feelings for her. However, the future was long. A swordsman, especially a high-level swordsman, had a lifespan of thousands of years. They had enough time to spend together, didn't they? The aptitude of Gu Xingyin's body was indeed astonishing. In just 10 short years, she had gone from an ordinary person who had yet to cultivate to a sword emperor expert. An 18-year-old sword emperor. When Gu Xingyin entered the star-gathering sword sect, most of them were still at the level of swordsmen. A few talented ones had become swordmasters. Bai Xinya, on the other hand, was still struggling at the swordsman level. Even Venerable Ling Xiao had once lamented that his disciple's aptitude was the best that he had ever seen in his life. Even he was inferior to Ouyangming. You've basically mastered everything I can teach you. With your current realm, you can be considered a powerhouse in the entire Tianlan continent. Your sword Dao will have to depend on yourself in the future. After Venerable Lingxiao said those words to Gu Xingyin and gave her a long sword that he had personally forged, he began a long period of seclusion. Gu Xingyin knew that her master had reached the end of his lifespan. If he couldn't make a breakthrough in his seclusion this time, master would probably never wake up again. Gu Xingyin asked the system, "Are there any medicinal pills or herbs that can prolong a person's life?" After 10 years of being together, she had truly regarded this man as her master. The system thought for a moment before replying, "In this world, there is a kind of heavenly treasure called the Taisui fungus. A 10-year Taisui could prolong one's life by 10 years, a 100-year Taisui could prolong one's life by 100 years, and a 1,000-year Taisui could prolong one's life by 1,000 years. However, in the original plot, there was only 1 century-old Taisui, which was consumed by Bai Xinya. Gu Xingyin made a mental note of it. Chapter 93. Senior brother, be careful. The delicate woman looked ahead with wide eyes. A man wearing the Star Net Sword Sect's inner sect uniform was fighting with a wolf-shaped monster. It was obvious that the man was unable to withstand the monster. But even so, he was still struggling bitterly. He shouted to the woman in white standing at the side, "Junior sister Bai, quickly leave." Gu Xingyin's figure was hidden at the side. Seeing this scene, she seriously looked at Bai Xinya, who was standing at the side motionlessly. Well, she was a beauty with average aptitude. She really couldn't figure out what charm she had to make so many men die for her. If it was just Bai Xinya, Gu Xingyin might have thought of letting her die in the mouth of the monster. But that man was a disciple of the Star Net Sword Sect. As a fellow disciple, she couldn't just stand by and watch. Zhao Shiming was an inner sect disciple of the Star Net Sword Sect. Today, he finally managed to ask his sweetheart out to relax, but he encountered the 4th-level monster, Howling Firmament Wolf. Seeing Bai Xinya's frightened face, Zhao Shiming only felt a sense of heroism in his heart. To be able to shelter a beauty like junior sister Bai from the wind and rain, that was what a real man should do. If Gu Xingyin could hear his thoughts, she would probably regret saving him. Bai Xinya saw that Zhao Shiming seemed to be unable to hold on and loudly asked her to leave. She thought that she would only be adding to senior brother's troubles if she stayed here. She might as well listen to senior brother and quickly leave to call for help. She was definitely not dragging out an ignoble existence. With that thought in mind, Baixinya became more and more confident. She turned and left, not even looking at Zhao Shiming. A dazzling sword light accompanied by ice and snow fell on the howling firmament wolf's body. There was no struggle, no resistance, a one-hit kill. Not even a drop of blood splashed out. Gu Xingyi's sword chi directly froze the howling firmament wolf. Zhao Shiming was stunned for a moment before he reacted. He bowed to Gu Xingyi. Star-gathering sword sex Zhao Shiming, thanks senior for saving my life. He raised his head and glanced at Gu Xingyi. Then, he froze. How could there be such a woman in this world? As she stood there, it was as if the air in the entire place had become cold and refreshing. His gaze was too direct. Gu Xingyi glanced at him indifferently. Only then did Zhao Shiming regain his senses with a flushed face. He lowered his head and did not dare to look at Gu Xingyi again. At this time, Baixinya, who realized that things had taken a turn for the better, slowly walked up and bowed to Gu Xingyi. Junior Baixinya of the Stellar Sword Sect, thanks senior for saving my life. She then looked at Zhao Shiming, her eyes quickly filled with tears. Senior brother Zhao, thank goodness you're all right. Gu Xingyi did not look at her. Instead, she turned to Zhao Shiming and said, friends who can't share trials and tribulations with others in times of danger should keep their eyes open. After saying this, she did not care about the expressions of the two people. She turned into a sword light and disappeared in the blink of an eye. She had said what she needed to say. What Zhao Shiming would do was none of her business. Baixinya was secretly angry. Who was this unknown woman in white? Wasn't she trying to drive a wedge between her and senior brother Zhao by saying such words? When she thought of this, her face suddenly became teary. She looked at Zhao Shiming and said, Senior Martial Brother Zhao, I left earlier because I wanted to go to the sect to ask for help. I didn't want to escape alone. Zhao Shiming's expression kept changing. No one knew what he was thinking. Hearing Baixinya's words, he suddenly smiled affectionately and said, Of course I believe that junior sister Bai is not such a person. Baixinya heard this and relaxed. She gently nestled in Zhao Shiming's arms and said carelessly, I don't know why that senior said such heart-wrenching words. Could it be that I offended her in some way? Zhao Shiming did not say anything. His eyes flashed coldly because of these words. Chapter 94. Gu Xingyi didn't tell anyone about her trip to Lingxiao Peak except for Xinghe. The Starry Sword sect was in the north of the Tianlan continent, so she headed south. It was said that Tai Sui liked dark and humid places and usually appeared in the south. Finding Tai Sui was only one of her goals. Venerable Ling Xiao gave her a mission for this trip. She had to challenge 100 sword emperors. When Gu Xingyi heard Venerable Ling Xiao's words, she complained to the system in her heart, Look, is this something a female martial artist should do? The system didn't want to answer her. Could you restrain your eager eyes a little when you said this? Recently, a sword emperor had appeared in the Tianlan continent, and he was in the limelight. It was said that she came from the north, and no one knew her identity or her sect. It was said that she was very young, but no witnesses revealed the truth, so no one knew her exact age. What everyone was sure of was that she was a woman, and a very beautiful woman. A lot of people were interested in the topic of women, not to mention a beautiful and powerful woman. This sword emperor, who had never been heard of before, started from the Starry Sword sect in the north and issued letters of challenge to every famous sword emperor. Sword cultivators liked to fight, and it was a fair challenge, so no one would refuse. One battle after another attracted everyone's attention to this sword emperor. 10 battles, 10 victories. 15 battles, 14 victories. 30 battles, 26 victories. More and more people started to follow her, guessing which famous sword emperor she would challenge next. Where would her sword stop in the end? Gu Xingyi sat in a tavern wearing a cloak, listening to the people at the next table talking. Did you hear? The Icy Heart Sword Emperor is going to challenge the Sword Emperor of the Huanhua Sword Sect. The Icy Heart Sword Emperor was the nickname Gu Xingyin that outsiders had given her. TCH. This news has spread everywhere. Who doesn't know about it? Then who do you think will win? I'm guessing it's the Ice Heart Sword Monarch. Didn't you see how many sword monarchs she challenged and how many times did she lose? Not necessarily. The clumsy Sword Emperor is one of the most powerful sword emperors in the Huanhua sword sect. How can those sword emperors compare with him? Open. Let's bet on which sword emperor will win the Battle of 1,000 Peaks. Place your bets. The location of the battle was set at the Battle of 1,000 Peaks, so everyone called it the Battle of 1,000 Peaks. I bet on the clumsy Sword Emperor. I bet on the Iceheart Sword Monarch. After Gu Xingyin finished the last bite, she got up and walked to the person who opened the bet, and took out a storage pouch. 50,000 sword stones. I bet on the Iceheart Sword Monarch. There was a moment of silence. After Gu Xingyin left, the crowd was in an uproar. Rich people indeed. She must be a young miss from some aristocratic family, and an admirer of the Iceheart Sword Emperor. It was interesting. After Gu Xingyin challenged several sword emperors continuously and achieved brilliant results, many swordsmen became her admirers. Every time Gu Xingyin challenged someone, many people would travel thousands of miles to watch the battle. Soon, the day of the battle arrived. Gu Xingyin arrived very early. She stood at the top of the 1,000 Peaks, feeling the biting cold wind blowing on her body. There were many people in the distance who came to watch the battle of their own accord. The clumsy Sword Emperor came a little later, and he seemed to attach great importance to the battle. Gu Xingyin slowly took off her cloak. Although he was mentally prepared, the clumsy Sword Emperor was still surprised by Gu Xingyin's young age when he saw her. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Chapter 95. Gu Xingyin puts away the sword in her hand. Thank you for letting me win. She salutes the Sword Emperor and turns to leave. Behind her, the Sword Emperor tries his best to support his body with his hands. Victory and defeat are obvious. Back to the temporary residence, Gu Xingyin can't bear it anymore and spits out a mouthful of blood. The Sword Emperor deserves to be a famous swordsman. Although she is lucky to win, she is also hurt by the sword energy and suffers internal injuries. It is detected that the host's body has been hurt by level B. It is recommended that the host should not have any fierce fighting in a month. The voice of the system rings in Gu Xingyin's mind. Gu Xingyin smiles. I see, I will have a good rest this month. At this time, a carrier rune in Gu Xingyin's storage ring lights up. Her eyes light up. It's Xuanke. I already know the result of the battle between you and the Sword Emperor. Are you okay? Xuanke is the person who knows Gu Xingyin's realm of Kendo best. He knows that Gu Xingyin's strength is almost the same as that of the Sword Emperor. Even if she wins, I'm afraid it's a narrow victory. Everything is okay. Senior brother, don't worry. Gu Xingyin thinks for a while and replies to him with 8 words. With Gu Weixin's temperament, he will probably only say these words. On the Lingyan peak of the distant star Luo sword sect, Xuanke looks at his junior sister apprentice's reply and frowns. Alas, my junior sister apprentice is like my uncle. They are all stuffy and won't take the initiative to say anything. It's really hard to be at ease. Otherwise, after a while, go out and see her. Xuanke thinks in his heart. Gu Xingyin holds the sword with one hand, and her left hand holds something with a faint silver light. She is surrounded by a lot of people. Sword Emperor Bing Xian, there are so many of us. You can't escape. I advise you to put down the Tai Sui in your hand. We won't embarrass you. Yes, put down the Tai Sui fungus, and we won't make things difficult for you. The Tai Sui fungus had appeared in the Twilight Swamp in the south, and Gu Xingyin had waited here for half a month before she finally obtained it. How could she possibly give it away? The Tai Sui in his hand was 800 years old. With it, his master would be able to hold on for a while longer. Gu Xingyin's expression warmed as she put it into her storage ring. Seeing Gu Xingyin's actions, everyone immediately knew her plan. Iceheart Sword Emperor, I advise you not to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. With such an outstanding beauty like you, why do you want to get caught up in all this fighting and killing? A black-robed man stood in the crowd and gazed at Gu Xingyin with infatuation. Surprisingly, he was a sword emperor as well. Gu Xingyin replied to him with a bright sword light. The man didn't expect that she would attack him. After narrowly dodging, he shouted at the people behind him, "Attack her! Be careful, don't kill her. I haven't tasted a beauty in the Sword Emperor realm yet." Bai Xinya leaned against a man in blue and watched Gu Xingyin rush to kill under the siege of a group of people. She stopped talking, which made the man next to her ask, "Xinya, what's wrong?" Bai Xinya seemed to be very hesitant. She bit her lip and said with a forced smile, "Forget it, it's inconvenient." "It's nothing." Although she said so, she kept looking at Gu Xingyin's direction. The man asked curiously, "Xinya, do you know the Sword Emperor Bing Xian?" Bai Xinya nodded. "I've seen that senior. She seems quite disdainful of me." Hearing this, the man in blue immediately felt protective. "What? That woman is really like that?" Bai Xinya seemed to be very embarrassed and nodded with tears in her eyes. Looking at her, those who didn't know would think that Gu Xingyin had done something to her. Chapter 96. In order to show off in front of the beauty, the man said proudly on the spot, "Xinya, don't worry. As the young master of Shitian Pavilion, I'm just a sword emperor without any sect. Let me take revenge for you." After that, he said to the old man who had been standing silently behind him, "Uncle Wen, doesn't that sword emperor Bing Xian have a Taisui? Go and help me snatch it. I want to give it to Xinya as a gift." Uncle Wen hesitated. "Young master, such a young sword emperor might have a powerful master behind her. We'd better not provoke her easily." Hearing this, the man in blue hesitated. But when he turned his head and saw Bai Xinya looking at him with admiration, his blood rushed to his head. If she really has a master, she would have reported it long ago. She must be just an unorthodox sword cultivator. "Uncle Wen, you don't have to worry too much. So what if she has a powerful background? Do you think our Shitian Pavilion is afraid of other people?" Uncle Wen sighed secretly. "Yes, sir." Gu Xingyin was already a little tired. Among the people besieging her, there were at least 3 sword emperors. If she was not careful, there would be another wound on her body. At this moment, a powerful aura locked on her. Gu Xingyin's heart trembled. He looked up and saw a gray-robed elder. "My young master wants the Taisui fungus in your hands. If it's convenient for you, my Shitian Pavilion can give you a generous compensation." Shitian Pavilion? Gu Xingyin looked over there. As expected, she saw Bai Xinya's figure. The young master of Shitian Pavilion, Shi Lufeng, was the scumbag Gu Xingyin fell in love with in the original plot. After Gu Xingyin came to this world, she had been practicing hard for 10 years. Naturally, she did not fall in love with Shi Lufeng in the original plot. She did not expect to meet him at this time. The pressure on the old man in gray was too strong. He was actually a sword venerable. But it was absolutely impossible for her to hand over the Taisui. Gu Xingyin said coldly, "The Taisui is very useful to me. You'd better give up this idea." When had the gray-robed old man ever been rejected in such a blatant manner? His expression darkened. Since that's the case, this old man will have to put in some effort. The aura of a sword venerable exploded in an instant, and the 3 sword emperors who were besieging Gu Xingyin retreated one after another. Gu Xingyin only felt an aura coming towards him. He couldn't suppress the injuries in his body for a moment, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. She raised the sword in her hand. The system shouted anxiously in Gu Xingyin's mind, "The host's situation is not optimistic, please do not force yourself." Gu Xingyin said, "I specially found this Taisui for master. I don't know when it will appear again. You can't hand it over." Chi. Gu Xingyin only felt a chill as the long sword pierced through his body. She felt a little weak in her body. Using her hand to support her sword, she knelt on the ground. A hint of killing intent flashed in the eyes of the gray-robed old man. Since they had become enemies, such a person couldn't be left in the world. How dare you? An angry voice seemed to come from the sky. The gray-robed old man only felt a flash in front of his eyes, and his body was cold. A snow-white corner of clothes flashed past, and this was the last scene he saw. Schwanka didn't look at the gray-robed old man lying on the ground. He bent down and picked up Gu Xingyin. Senior brother? Gu Xingyin only felt a warm aura surrounding her. The familiar feeling made her feel extremely at ease, and she fell asleep with ease. Chapter 97. When Xianku saw his junior sister covered in blood, his heart, which had always been calm, actually started to panic. He was afraid that he was a step too late. Fortunately, he hugged the person in his arms. Fortunately, the situation wasn't too bad. He turned around and his indifferent eyes swept across the dumbfounded crowd. Sword. Sword Saint. Someone couldn't help but cry out in a low voice. To be able to kill a sword saint without even drawing his sword, who else could it be but a sword saint? Schwanka ignored these people and turned to leave with Gu Xingyin in his arms. These people secretly breathed a sigh of relief, especially those who had participated in the siege of Gu Xingyin. They were secretly happy that they had escaped. Who knew that in the next moment, a sword light that seemed to be able to cover the sky would descend? Schwanka's words resounded in everyone's hearts. Those who hurt my junior sister will pay with blood. One after another, blood-curdling screams came from all directions. None of those who had participated in the siege of Gu Xingyin were spared. Bai Xinya couldn't help but shiver. Her gaze drifted in the direction that Schwanka had left. A sword saint. Was he so powerful? If someone could protect her like this. She lowered her eyes, hiding the desire in them. When Gu Xingyin woke up, she felt pain all over her body. System, can I apply to block out the pain? She discussed with the system. The system was unwilling to cooperate. The system has warned the host before to stop dangerous actions. This will lead to extremely serious consequences, even the death of the host's physical body in this world. Since the host didn't listen to the advice, then you must be prepared to suffer. For some reason, Gu Xingyin could hear the concern in the system's words. She begged for mercy. All right, I'll be careful next time. Being careful, not guaranteeing that it wouldn't happen again. Gu Xingyin thought that there were some things that could not be avoided just because one knew the consequences. After all, the system was just an artificial intelligence. It couldn't understand Gu Xingyin's subtext. Moreover, the host's performance had always been excellent. The naive system was quickly coaxed into forgiving Gu Xingyin. Junior sister, you're awake? Schwanka came in with a tray in his hands. Senior brother. Gu Xingyin looked at him with an inexplicable sense of guilt. Since you're awake, drink the medicine. Schwanka ignored him and got up to leave. Senior brother? Gu Xingyin quickly grabbed his sleeve. Schwanka looked at her with half-closed eyes. Senior brother, are you angry? Gu Xingyin said with certainty. Schwanka looked at his junior sister carefully. He didn't even notice that the little girl who looked like she was carved out of jade had grown so big without him noticing. His junior sister took after martial uncle Ling Xiao. She was usually silent and looked at everyone with a cold expression. Only when she was with him would she occasionally show the little temper of an ordinary girl. But that lively junior sister was now pale. Her lips were red without a trace of blood. When he saw her, she was kneeling on the ground weakly. He didn't know if she was dead or alive. No one knew how flustered he was at that time. Schwanka looked at Gu Xingyin's confused expression and the nameless anger in his heart suddenly flared up. Why would senior brother be angry? What is senior brother angry about? Angry that you're still holding on despite your injuries? Angry that you're so capable that you can fight 3 sword emperors and a sword venerable alone? Or angry that you've only been out for a few short months and you've gotten yourself into this state? He pried away Gu Xingyin's hand that was grabbing onto his sleeve one by one, but was blocked by Gu Xingyin's other hand. I was wrong, senior brother. Gu Xingyin obediently admitted her mistake. She looked at Schwanke eagerly. Her clear eyes were filled with his figure. Looking at Gu Xingyin like this, Schwanke suddenly felt his anger dissipate. Chapter 98. Gu Xingyin stayed at Schwanke's Lingyun Peak for a long time. Schwanke didn't allow her to leave until all her injuries were healed. She took the time to go to Lingxiao Peak and gave the Taisui fungus to her master. Venerable Lingxiao just shook his head. My swordsmanship has reached the extreme. My only chance of survival is to make another breakthrough. Otherwise, I'll just struggle at death's door for a few hundred years. Gu Xingyin felt bitter in her heart. She smiled. With master's attainments in swordsmanship, you'll definitely make a breakthrough. Venerable Lingxiao looked at his only disciple with a gentle gaze. The only thing I'm worried about is you. However, I've already asked your senior brother to take care of you. He'll take good care of you. His words indicated that he was prepared for the worst. Gu Xingyin had been depressed since she returned from Lingxiao Peak. Schwanke knew that she was worried about Martial Uncle. Life and death are up to fate. Martial Uncle has already accepted it. Junior sister, why do you have to be so stubborn? A swordsman must have the determination to face everything head-on. Gu Xingyin understood this logic. Although she could accept it rationally, she couldn't get used to it so quickly emotionally. After all, ever since she came to this world, Ling Xiao was her master and family. He had accompanied and taught her for 10 years. Schwanke also knew that other than his junior sister herself, no one else could do anything. Schwanke suggested that Gu Xingyin start teaching in the Stellar Sword Sect. With her identity as a sword emperor, it was more than enough to teach ordinary swordsman disciples. Schwanke just wanted Gu Xingyin to find something to distract her. Since he mentioned it to the Star River Sect master, it was naturally impossible for him to refuse. When Bai Xinya returned to her small courtyard, she happened to hear a few outer disciples who lived in the same courtyard talking. I heard that she's a sword emperor. In terms of seniority, she's our great-grandmaster. When the female disciples saw Bai Xinya enter, they all stopped talking and did not say anything else. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Bai Xinya felt extremely wronged in the face of undisguised isolation. Her heart ached, and tears welled up in her eyes. Oh, don't you cry. One of the female disciples with a fiery temper said directly, if those inner sect senior brothers see this, they will definitely think that we bullied you again. This crime is not something that we, as mere outer sect disciples, can bear. Bai Xinya choked and held back the tears that were about to flow out of her eyes. Seeing that none of them had the intention to talk to her, she could only silently walk back to her room. Bah! Who are you pretending to be weak all day long? The woman who spoke earlier said disdainfully. Another female disciple said, don't those senior brothers like this type? They complained to each other. There were very few female swordsmen in the first place. Those who chose to become swordsmen were all determined people. Naturally, they didn't like Bai Xinya's tearful attitude. Moreover, they didn't treat Bai Xinya like this in the beginning. But later, they slowly realized that as long as they talked about something in the courtyard, the entire outer sect would know about it within a day. Later, when they found out that it was Bai Xinya's doing, they couldn't help but feel disgusted. When they found Bai Xinya, she was still looking at them with pure and innocent eyes. There's nothing that can't be told. Senior sisters, you didn't talk about anything bad. Their courtyard had become the joke of the outer sect. Chapter 99. Starnet Sword Sect's Sword Discourse Hall. Zhao Ximing woke up very early today because he had heard the news a few days ago that a grandmaster would be teaching the disciples in the Sword Discourse Hall. Perhaps those who had taken an elder as their master wouldn't care about the teachings of a sword emperor. But for these inner sect disciples who hadn't taken a master yet, it was a rare opportunity. Not to mention those outer sect disciples with ordinary aptitude. However, although he had arrived early, when he arrived at the Sword Discourse Hall, he found that the best seats had already been occupied. It turned out that there were even more people who had arrived earlier than him. Zhao Shiming saw Bai Xinya in the crowd with a glance. Her seat was extremely close to the front. It was impossible for a mere outer sect disciple like her to occupy such a seat. Zhao Shiming's eyes swept to the side, and as expected, he saw a male disciple dressed in inner sect disciple attire sitting beside Bai Xinya. Zhao Shiming recognized this person. He was among the inner sect disciples this year, a genius with an 8th level sword heart. The two of them were intimate, and their relationship could be seen at a glance. Zhao Shiming smiled coldly. Since that day in the wilderness when he was reminded by that unknown senior, he began to secretly observe Bai Xinya. The more he knew, the colder his heart became. He also deeply felt that he was simply blind to be so devoted to Bai Xinya before. That woman was clearly dragging him along. While maintaining an intimate relationship with him, she even maintained an ambiguous relationship with several inner and outer sect disciples at the same time. He even saw an outer sect disciple who had been abandoned by Bai Xinya. After Bai Xinya realized that he was of no use to her, Bai Xinya's face immediately changed. That outer sect disciple was unwilling to give up and continued to pester her. He was directly beaten half to death by Bai Xinya's pursuers. During the entire process, Bai Xinya only hid behind others, pretending that she couldn't bear to see blood. She didn't open her mouth to plead for that outer sect disciple. This kind of woman wasn't weak and pitiful at all. She was clearly selfish and cold to the extreme. After that, Zhao Shiming distanced himself from Bai Xinya. If he continued to be with her, he wouldn't even know how he died one day. Zhao Shiming came back to his senses, and found that all the seats in the Sword Discourse Hall had been taken. There were even many people who stood outside the door because they had no seats. "She's here," he heard someone say. Zhao Shiming subconsciously looked up as if a cold fragrance had brushed past his body. He was stunned. It's actually her? Zhao Shiming recognized at a glance that the white-robed woman sitting at the head of the table was the senior who had saved his life in the wilderness that day. No one would forget a person like Gu Xingyin after a single glance. So, she was actually his great ancestor. Bai Xinya also recognized Gu Xingyin. Unlike Zhao Shiming's mixed feelings, when she saw Gu Xingyin, her heart was full of uneasiness and fear. This woman was actually her great ancestor? She felt uneasy in her heart. She had met her twice before. The first time, this great ancestor master had clearly expressed her dislike for her. The second time, she was standing with the people who had besieged her. Although it could be said that one who didn't know was not guilty, if this great ancestor were to label her as disrespectful to the elders of the sect, she, Bai Xinya, could only admit defeat. Gu Xingyin naturally also saw Bai Xinya. However, she only glanced at her briefly before moving her gaze away. As long as this woman didn't provoke her, Gu Xingyin, who only wanted to complete her mission, didn't have the extra effort to deal with her. Chapter 100. Bai Xinya saw that Gu Xingyin's eyes fell on her and quickly moved away, as if she didn't know her. She breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that this great ancestor didn't recognize her. But at the same time, a sense of unwillingness emerged from her heart. This great ancestor looked at her as if she were looking at ants. Isn't she just extremely talented and worshipped a good master? We're all human beings. Why does she look down on me? If Gu Xingyin could hear her heart, she would tell her, "Girl, you really think too much. Gu Weixin is like this. She doesn't have any extra feelings when she looks at anyone." What's more, everyone was looked at by Gu Xingyin, but only she, Gu Xingyin, thought that she looked down on him. There was a Buddha in her heart, and all she saw was Buddha. After all, Gu Xingyin was a sword emperor powerhouse. It was not difficult for her to teach a group of ordinary swordsmen. What's more, she had knowledge beyond this world in her mind. Her teaching style was different from the other elders of the Star Luo sword sect. She omitted those obscure chants and expressed her understanding of swordsmanship in a more simple and clear way. She even helped those swordsmen to answer their doubts. There was no doubt that her lectures were extremely popular among these disciples. The morning passed quickly. Gu Xingyin was about to get up and leave when she suddenly felt a familiar breath. Her expression changed, and she walked out of the door. Sure enough, she saw Xuanke waiting on one side. "Senior brother, why are you here?" Seeing her lover, Gu Xingyin's face was obviously softer. At this time, the disciples of the sword discussion hall didn't leave. They admired this great ancestor, but they were also frozen by the cold air around her. At this moment, seeing that this cold great ancestor was no longer releasing cold air, they were curious about who she was and how she could have such ability. When they heard Gu Xingyin's address, they were all stunned. "Senior brother?" It was said that this martial ancestor had become the disciple of one of the two grand elders in the sect, the sword saint elder Ling Shao. However, he had never heard of this grand elder having other disciples. Others, including the sect master, had to address Gu Xingyin as grandmaster in terms of seniority. Wait a minute. There was one more person. Lingyan Peak, which was next to Lingshao Peak, also had a grand elder. For a moment, everyone looked at Xuanke with burning eyes. Bai Xinya was no exception. That was a sword saint. Bai Xinya's eyes flickered. If this sword saint expert could take a liking to her, who in the Star Azura sword sect, or even the Sky Below Great World, would dare to look down on her? What's more, this grand elder was so good-looking. Bai Xinya secretly blushed. She suddenly stood up and walked towards Gu Xingyin and Xuanke. Xuanke was talking to his junior sister when he sensed someone approaching. He glanced at Bai Xinya, feeling slightly impatient. Who was this person? How could she be so unruly? Gu Xingyin also saw Bai Xinya. She was rather curious. What was this woman up to now? Bai Xinya walked gracefully in front of the two and bowed. Disciple Bai Xinya pays respect to the two seniors. Her voice carried a natural charm, and her watery eyes looked at Xuanke affectionately. At this moment, Gu Xingyin knew what she was thinking. She had actually set her sights on her lover. Gu Xingyin did not say anything, but waited to see how Xuanke would react. Xuanke frowned. He felt that Bai Xinya's gaze was very strange, and felt a little guilty. This kind of thing should not be seen by his junior sister. Chapter 101. He looked at Bai Xinya's expectant eyes. Seeing that his junior sister had no intention of speaking, he asked, "What's the matter?" The smile on Bai Xinya's face became even more charming. She said shyly, "This disciple admires senior's elegance, so I came to pay my respects to senior." In her experience, when a man saw a beautiful girl admiring him, he would definitely be very proud. This grand elder would definitely be interested in her. Bai Xinya couldn't help but smile. However, Xuanke's next words made her smile freeze on her face. "Which peak are you from? You don't know the rules." Xuanke frowned. "You interrupted the conversation between your master and your elders because of this reason." "Who is your master?" Bai Xinya's face turned pale. She didn't expect things to develop like this. She still wanted to say something, but the pressure from Xuanke's body made it hard for her to breathe. She could only respectfully lower her head and say, "This disciple is an outer sect disciple. Currently, I don't have a master." Xuanke nodded. "So you're an outer sect disciple. You lack guidance and don't know etiquette. I don't blame you." His words made Bai Xinya feel so ashamed that she wanted to die. Did he mean that she didn't have a good upbringing? Because Gu Xingyin hadn't left yet, the disciples in the sword discourse hall didn't get up. At this moment, their gazes all fell on Bai Xinya. Bai Xinya's figure was on the verge of collapse. She felt that everyone was laughing at her. Xuanke looked at her and frowned. This kind of behavior, was she a sword cultivator? He glanced at Gu Xingyin, who had a calm expression. "Yes, junior sister is much better." He spread out his divine sense. Elder Xingshi, who was in charge of the outer sect, was drinking tea in his room. When he heard Xuanke's voice, he was so scared that he almost choked. "Come to the sword discourse hall quickly." He didn't have time to think about what had happened. Without saying a word, he put down the teacup in his hand and came to the sword discourse hall. "Greetings, Venerable Ling Yun." "Greetings, Junior Grand Uncle." Elder Xingshi bowed to the two of them. Although Gu Xingyin's cultivation level was not as high as his, in terms of seniority, she was his martial grandaunt. Not to mention, the 18-year-old sword emperor. Elder Xingshi clearly understood that it was only a matter of time before young martial granduncle became a sword venerable, or even a sword great master. In fact, it was extremely likely that he would enter the legendary realm. He was sincerely convinced by this salute. Xuanke said indifferently, "Are you in charge of the outer sect disciples? Although he's not your personal disciple, you should still teach him some etiquette and what he should and shouldn't do." Elder Xingshi was confused. He glanced at Bai Xinya, who was standing on the side. Although he didn't understand what had happened, he could guess that this disciple had angered the two people in front of him. No matter how he was going to deal with it, it was more important to apologize first. He hurriedly said, "It's my fault for being negligent in my management. Please forgive me, junior granduncle." Seeing enlightened Master Xingshi's attitude, Xuanke didn't say much. He pulled Gu Xingyin and left. Elder Xingshi respectfully watched the two of them leave. He looked at Bai Xinya, who was standing on the side with an aggrieved face. His face was as gloomy as water. "Come with me." He pointed at a few outer sect disciples and said, "You guys, come with me. Tell me what happened." After the people involved left, the disciples who were still in the sword discourse hall burst into an uproar. They were discussing what had just happened. Zhao Shiming sneered and left. Chapter 102. Tell me, what happened just now? Elder Xingshi looked at Bai Xinya with a solemn expression. Bai Xinya could not help but shudder when a sword venerable expert looked at her with such a gaze. She cowered and said, I just admire the elegance of the two martial granduncles and wanted to pay my respects." Elder Xingshi looked at the two disciples beside him and said, "You two, tell me the whole story. Don't leave out a single word." The two disciples did not dare to hide anything. Elder Xingshi waved his hand to let them leave. He looked at Bai Xinya. After being in charge of the outer sect for so many years, he had seen all kinds of people. The two martial granduncles, who were focused on cultivation and did not care about worldly affairs, might not be able to see through Bai Xinya's thoughts, but it could not be hidden from him. "I've lived for so many years and have seen many ambitious people, but it's the first time I've seen someone like you." His expression was gloomy. Sword cultivation focuses on the cultivation of the heart. You don't think about improving yourself, and your mind is actually filled with these crooked methods. How can you make any progress on the path of the sword? You should be glad that martial granduncles do not intend to pursue this matter. Otherwise, no one will be able to protect you. Go to Reflection Peak and stay there. Come down when you're in a good mood. Bai Xinya immediately became exhausted. Reflection Peak, as the name suggested, was a place where the disciples of the Stellar Sword sect who had made mistakes reflected on their mistakes. It was bone-chilling and desolate all year round. How could one live such a life? However, no one in the outer sect could change Elder Xingshi's decision. Gu Xingyin had already returned to Lingyun Peak with Xuanke. Ever since she was injured, she had been staying at Lingyun Peak where Xuanke was at. Now that her injuries were mostly healed, neither of them had the intention to let Gu Xingyin return to Lingxiao Peak. However, Venerable Lingxiao was in seclusion, so it was better not to disturb him. "Junior sister, why do you keep looking at me?" Xuanke was a little puzzled. Ever since the two of them left the sword discourse hall, his junior sister had been looking at him with a strange expression. Gu Xingyin suddenly had a mischievous thought. "I see that senior brother's face is like jade, your figure is like an orchid, and you are as graceful as an immortal. You can't blame that female disciple for having thoughts about you." Xuanke had never been tormented or teased by anyone before, so he actually blushed for a moment. "Junior martial sister, don't talk nonsense." The system was also looking at Gu Xingyin curiously. It seemed that with the completion of one mission after another, the host's personality seemed to have become more lively. Gu Xingyin suddenly smiled. Xuanke looked up and saw this smile. He always knew that his junior sister was beautiful, but he never thought that his junior sister's smile would be so beautiful. It was as if a beam of light had suddenly broken through the darkness, stunning and dazzling. He inexplicably felt that his heart was beating a little faster when he saw this smile. "Senior brother, you're so handsome. It's normal for girls to admire you. Senior brother, don't be shy." Xuanke didn't answer Gu Shengyin. He looked at his junior sister's smiling face and suddenly asked an inexplicable question. "The junior sister's color is better than that of senior brother, and there will be many people who admire junior sister?" Gu Shengyin is stuck for a while. Gu Weixin's appearance is really beautiful, but it's too high to reach. There must be people who admire her, but no one dares to say it. Xuanke took her silence as acquiescence. For a moment, he was so upset that he blurted out, "Sword is important. Junior sister is still young. Don't be distracted by this kind of thing." Chapter 103. After that, Gu Shengyin regularly lectured on the way of the sword at the Sword Discourse Hall every few days. The news outside also gradually spread. Not long ago, the Ice Heart Sword Emperor who made a name for herself in the Tianlan continent was actually the martial grandmaster who lectured on the way of the sword for them. Gu Shengyin very clearly felt that the number of disciples coming to the Sword Discourse Hall had increased recently. Moreover, those disciples all looked at her with an expression of worship. For some reason, Xuanke would come to the Sword Discourse Hall every day after she finished lecturing on the way of the sword to bring her back to Lingyun Peak. Until one day, the systems suddenly sent a message to Gu Shengyin. Bai Xinya and Shi Lufeng actually appeared together in the Phoenix Perching Valley in the southern region of the Tianlan Great World. Gu Shengyin, who knew the original plot, naturally knew that this Phoenix Perching Valley was clearly an active volcano. This was where Bai Xinya was poisoned by the fire poison. Bai Xinya was currently reflecting on her mistakes at Reflection Peak. How did she run to Phoenix Perching Valley? Before Gu Shengyin could ask, she received the system's order. "You want me to go to Phoenix Perching Valley and stop Bai Xinya from obtaining the fiery eye-flowing serum?" Gu Shengyin asked. To be honest, ever since Gu Shengyin started accepting missions, the system almost never asked her to carry out any missions. Suddenly giving such an order made her feel a little curious. The system didn't know the twists and turns in Gu Shengyin's mind. It said methodically, "The fiery eye-flowing serum's effect is to cleanse the marrow and temper the heart of the sword. Bai Xinya's goal is to use the fiery eye-flowing serum to raise her aptitude. The system has detected that Bai Xinya's malice towards the host is 70%. Current status towards the host, hostile. It's very likely that she will pose a threat to the host. The system has the responsibility to eliminate dangerous factors for the host. Therefore, the host must stop Bai Xinya from obtaining the fiery eye-flowing serum." Gu Shengyin nodded and suddenly asked, "I don't think I have offended Bai Xinya. Why does she hate me?" The system said, analyzing. Analysis failed. The human heart is too complicated, the system cannot analyze Bai Xinya's psychological changes. Gu Shengyin, listening to the system's serious answer, "I suddenly feel like laughing." Since there was a mission, Gu Shengyin naturally had to complete it. She went to Xuanke's residence and told him the purpose of her visit. "You want to go to the Phoenix Perching Valley?" Xuanke frowned. "It's hot there all year round and not a single blade of grass grows there. What's there to see? I've had some enlightenment during this period of time, and I'm about to go into seclusion for a period of time. Why don't I go with you in a few days?" Gu Shengyin thought to herself, "By the time you come out of seclusion, the fiery eye-flowing serum would already be in Bai Xinya's hands." She shook her head, "Senior brother, I'm just bored and want to go out for a walk. Don't worry, I promise I won't go out and cause trouble this time. I'm a sword cultivator at the Sword Emperor realm after all. I have the ability to protect myself." Xuanke had no choice but to say, "Then you have to be safe. If there's anything, you must contact me immediately." Gu Shengyin nodded. She was about to leave when Xuanke suddenly called out to her. Seeing his junior sister looking at him with some doubt, Xuanke only felt his face heat up slightly. "Junior sister, you're inexperienced in the world. Don't be deceived by others outside. Especially when I heard that many men will use flowery words to coax beautiful women. Gu Xingyin heard this and could not maintain her facial expression for a moment. She burst out laughing. I know, senior brother. Don't worry, I won't even look at those who aren't as good looking as you. Chapter 104. Hot. This was the only feeling Gu Xingyin had when she stood in this phoenix perching valley. As the Sword Emperor, she should be immune to both heat and cold. But in this place, she still felt the shocking heat. No wonder it was a place that could give birth to a treasure like the fiery eye liquid. The volcanoes in Qing Shiji's world that she had experienced before couldn't be compared to this at all. The system only gave her the task of stopping Bai Xinya from getting the fiery eye liquid. As for how to do it, there were no requirements. Actually, Gu Xingyin had the simplest way to eliminate Bai Xinya's threat to her: kill her. But she didn't think of doing so. Firstly, Bai Xinya had that white lotus halo. According to the system, it had the effect of increasing luck. It was hard to say whether it could take her life. Secondly, Gu Xingyin herself wasn't willing to do so. She was a created human and had always cherished life. If Bai Xinya didn't really do anything to her, she couldn't indulge herself to kill someone who only had evil intentions towards her. At this time, Bai Xinya was still on the way to the Phoenix Perching Valley with Shi Lufeng. Although the Phoenix Perching Valley could give birth to the legendary fiery eye liquid, the chance of it being born was really too small. It might not even appear once in 1,000 years. So usually, other than some people who occasionally came here to try their luck, not many people would keep watch here. When Gu Xingyin arrived, there were only 2 people here. One was unexpectedly an acquaintance. It was Zhao Shiming, an inner disciple of the Star-Gathering Sword sect whose life she had once saved. Great-Grand Martial Uncle. Zhao Shiming was clearly very happy to see Gu Xingyin. He glanced at Gu Xingyin and suddenly said in a low voice, "Great-Grand Martial Uncle, please come with me." Gu Xingyin followed him to one side. Only then did Zhao Shiming look at her. "Martial Grand Aunt, it would be best for you to conceal your appearance. After all, you are now a rather famous person in the great sky below world. It would be very easy for people to connect you to your identity. This time, I have received definite news. On the 15th of this month, when the moon is at its fullest, there will be fire-eye oozing magma appearing in the Phoenix Perching Valley. In order to avoid being targeted, it is better for Martial Granduncle to conceal it." He looked at Gu Xingyin with a sincere gaze. Gu Xingyin was surprised. "Such important news, you actually told me. Are you not afraid that I have other thoughts?" Zhao Shiming smiled wryly. "With your 10th order sword heart, what's the use of this fire-eye liquid? Moreover," he looked seriously at Gu Xingyin. "This disciple believes that Martial Granduncle is definitely not that kind of person." Gu Xingyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She felt that she had met an admirer. However, she glanced at Zhao Shiming. She found this person pleasing to the eye. If she obtained the fire-eye liquid, it wouldn't be bad to give him a favor. Since Zhao Shiming was so sure that the fire-eye liquid would appear, presumably Bai Xinya and the others had also received the same news. In the next few days, Gu Xingyin and Zhao Shiming quietly waited for the arrival of the 15th. Occasionally, they would send a message to Xuanke, indicating that they were all well. Soon, Bai Xinya and Shi Lufeng arrived. Gu Xingyin glanced at them. Shi Lufeng, as the young master of the Shitian Pavilion, definitely wouldn't come alone. A sword emperor and a sword venerable. It seemed that Shi Lufeng was indeed favored. She didn't feel that after her identity was exposed, the people of the Shitian Pavilion would still dare to make a move against her. Unless, they could bear the anger of the 2 sword saints of the Star-Scattered Sword sect. Chapter 105. Bai Xinya also saw Zhao Shiming. She was a little uneasy, afraid that Zhao Shiming would come to her. Since catching up with Shi Lufeng, she has been alienated from Zhao Shiming and others. Of course, she doesn't think it's because Shi Liufeng's temper is too overbearing, but she feels that she has found true love. In fact, she thinks too much. Zhao Shiming doesn't mean to pay attention to her at all. Instead, Bai Xinya looks at Gu Xingyin. Because of the cloak, she didn't recognize who Gu Xingyin is. Looking at Zhao Shiming's attentive appearance to her, she thought it was his new love. Thinking of this possibility, she was unhappy again. She felt that she thought she treated Zhao Shiming with sincerity. Unexpectedly, she found a new person so quickly, which made her feel betrayed. She completely forgot that there was a Shi Lufeng standing beside her. The more Bai Xinya thought about it, the more unwilling she felt. She got up and walked to Zhao Shiming. "Brother Zhao, long time no see." Zhao Shiming nodded coldly. That Shi Lufeng stood beside Bai Xinya, just like a flower protector. Looking at Zhao Shiming's expression is very alert. Gu Xingyin is suddenly curious. What happened to the original body Gu Weixin? She gave up so many excellent pursuers and looked at Shi Lufeng in this man. "Brother Zhao, are you here for the fire eye?" As soon as Bai Xinya said this, the eyes around all looked over. Zhao Shiming once again scolded himself for being blind at the beginning. He actually liked such a brainless woman. Can such words be said casually? Seeing that Zhao Shiming didn't speak, Bai Xinya suddenly bit her lip. "I'm also here for the fire eye." "Brother Zhao, your sword heart level is so high that you certainly don't need it. Can you give it to me?" Before Zhao Shiming could refuse, Gu Xingyin on the side spoke. "No." Bai Xinya only felt that the voice sounded familiar, but she didn't think about it. "Who are you? What right do you have to answer my question on behalf of Senior Marshal Brother Zhao?" Bai Xinya was not as gentle towards Gu Xingyin, who was also a woman. At this time, Zhao Shiming recovered from the shock of the goddess speaking up for him. Hearing that the goddess was being questioned, he immediately said bluntly, "Her opinion is my opinion. It just so happens that I also need the fiery eye fluid. Let's just rely on our own abilities." Bai Xinya looked at Zhao Shiming in disbelief. "Senior Brother Zhao, you weren't like this before?" Zhao Shiming silently said in his heart, "I think so too. I must have been possessed by the devil in the past." Shi Lufeng was already impatient. He put his arm around Bai Xinya's waist and looked at Zhao Shiming and Gu Xingyin in disdain. "Xinya, don't worry. I promise that the fiery eye liquid will be yours." Bai Xinya looked at the two experts standing behind him and smiled sweetly, nestling in his arms obediently. At this time, the surrounding temperature suddenly rose sharply. Zhao Shiming and the others were fine, but Bai Xinya screamed. Her exposed skin couldn't withstand the high temperature, and a string of blisters appeared on it. "I'm afraid that the fiery eye liquid is about to be born." Gu Xingyin glanced at Zhao Shiming. The two nodded and rushed towards the depths of Phoenix Perching Valley. "You guys go in too. You must bring the fiery eye liquid back." Shi Lufeng comforted Bai Xinya and turned to order the two experts behind him. Chapter 106. Gu Xingyin and Zhao Shiming were the first to act. The system was confident, "Host, don't worry. Under the same conditions, your chances of obtaining the treasure are higher than anyone else." The saying that the protagonist is favored by the laws of the world is not without reason. The truth was just as the system had said. While the others were still fretting over whether or not the magma had appeared, Zhao Shiming had already followed Gu Xingyin all the way to the place where the magma was flowing out of the Eye of Fire. Zhao Shiming said joyfully, "Rumor has it that the fire eye flowing lava is extremely hard to find. Normally, it would take 10 days to half a month to find it. I didn't think that our luck would be so good this time, to actually obtain this item on the first day." Gu Xingyin could only maintain her smile. Zhao Shiming carefully took out a palm-sized white jade bottle. Gu Xingyin could tell at a glance that this was made of cold jade. It seemed that Zhao Shiming had made a lot of preparations for this fire eye flowing lava. The entire pool of fiery eye liquid was actually completely filled by this small bottle that was no more than an inch long. Zhao Shiming carefully put away the bottle. After hesitating, he said to Gu Xingyin, "Elder, this fire eye flowing lava." Gu Xingyin had already opened her mouth to interrupt him. "I have no use for this fire eye flowing lava, you can keep it." Zhao Shiming was a bit ashamed. He originally planned to ask Gu Xingyin to see if she could give this to him. After all, one portion of fire eye flowing lava could only be used by one person. He really needed this item. He didn't think that she had the idea to give it to him from the start. Gu Xingxing knew what he was thinking from his appearance. She said, I originally came here to see the legendary scenery of the Phoenix Perching Valley. Encountering the fire-flowing lava was just a coincidence. You don't have to feel guilty. Seeing this, Zhao Shiming didn't say anything else. He solemnly bowed towards Gu Xingyin. Disciple thanks Grand Marshal Uncle for his kindness. If there is a chance in the future, disciple will do his best to repay. Gu Xingyin didn't take this promise seriously, but Zhao Shiming remembered it in his heart. Now that everyone is looking for the fiery eye liquid, let's leave this place quickly. It's only been a day. No one will believe that we've already obtained something, Gu Xingyin said. Zhao Shiming nodded. Sure enough, when the two of them arrived at the exit of the Phoenix Perching Valley, they saw the forces of the Washing Heavens Pavilion guarding there. It seemed that they had already planned to forcefully seize the fiery eye-flowing plasma even if they didn't find it. Junior sister, I wonder why Master called us back in such a hurry. That's right. It wasn't easy for us to wait for the flowing flame plasma to appear. Who would have thought that before we even started looking for it, it would already be discovered by a sect? When the guard at the door saw the two of them in a hurry, it seemed like they really did have something urgent to attend to. In addition, the fiery eye lava had just appeared, so it was impossible for it to be found so quickly. He didn't question them in detail and just let them go. Gu Xingyin heaved a sigh of relief. Although she was not afraid of a fight, it would inevitably delay time. If she attracted the attention of the venerable sword master, it would not be so easy to escape. I'm preparing to return to the sect and go into seclusion. I wonder if Great Grand Marshal Uncle is all right? Gu Xingyin's mission was already completed. She nodded, I'm also preparing to return to the sect. The two of them didn't delay. Almost as soon as they returned to the sect, they heard the bounty issued by the Washing Heavens Pavilion. Whoever could cure the fire poison, the Washing Heavens Pavilion would treat them with a position of worship. Gu Xingyin understood. It seemed that Bai Xinya still couldn't avoid the original plot. Chapter 107. Clap. Shi Lufeng looked at Yi Shiwen, not looking at the cup on the ground, and roared, all of you are useless. Isn't it just a fire poison, and no one can cure it? Lufeng, ah. I'm in pain. Bai Xinya's cry of pain came from the inner room. Shi Lufeng hurried into the room and saw Bai Xinya tossing and turning on the bed. Her whole body's skin showed an abnormal flush, and it felt scorching hot to the touch. Bai Xinya saw Shi Lufeng come in and couldn't help but shout, Lufeng. Lufeng, save me. Shi Lufeng saw Bai Xinya in this state, and his heart was in great pain. Bai Xinya's head drooped down weakly. Shi Lufeng withdrew his hand from her nape and went out. He really loved her. There had never been a woman who could make him feel this way. Young master. At this time, a follower behind him hesitantly opened his mouth. What's the matter? Just say it. The follower hesitated for a long time, but still said, I heard that there is a way to cure this fire poison, and it requires the blood essence of someone who has the ice soul sword heart. Blood essence was the most essential part of spirit. It was undoubtedly an extremely important existence for sword cultivators. Not to mention the most precious blood essence. Shi Liufeng's eyes darkened. Everyone in the world knows that only the Ice Soul Sword Heart of Star Luo Sword Sect has the Ice Soul Sword Heart, the direct disciple of Venerable Ling Xiao. Are you asking me to offend a sword saint expert? Star Luo Sword Sect would never agree to use half of the blood essence of an 18-year-old sword emperor expert to save an outer disciple. The follower hurriedly knelt on the ground in fear. I've only heard of this matter. I don't have any other thoughts. All right. Get up. Don't mention this matter to anyone else. The follower left trembling with fear. Shi Lufeng stood alone in the same place, slowly sinking into deep thought. On this side, Gu Xingyin already knew that Bai Xinya had been poisoned by the fire poison. She knew that if nothing unexpected happened, Shi Lufeng would soon know the way to cure it, and in the end, he would still target her. Gu Xingyin had to admit that Shi Lufeng really loved Bai Xinya to the bone. But this couldn't be a reason for him to wantonly hurt others for Bai Xinya. Gu Xingyin decided to give them a big gift. The next day, a piece of news. It was said that the lover of Shi Lufeng, the young master of the Washing Heavens Pavilion, was poisoned by fire, and the only antidote was the blood essence of the Ice Heart Sword Empress of the Star-Gathering Sword Sect. As soon as the rumor came out, gossiping, everyone waited. Mainly, both were too famous. Although Shi Lufeng Pavilion could be considered a big force in the Great Sky Billow world, compared to Star Luo Sword Sect, there was still a big gap. Needless to say, Ice Soul Sword Heart made a big name for herself in the Great Sky Billow world a long time ago, and then exposed her identity in the swamp battle. She turned out to be the personal disciple of Star Luo Sword Sect Sword Saint Expert, Venerable Ling Xiao, an 18-year-old sword emperor, a peerless genius born with the Ice Soul Sword Heart. Shi Liufeng's face was livid. He had obviously concealed this matter very well. Who on earth leaked the news? In this way, if Xinya's fire poison was cured or something happened to Ice Soul Sword Heart, everyone's first suspect would be Shi Lufeng Pavilion. Gu Xingyin smiled slightly. I wonder if you're satisfied with this gift. Chapter 108. When Xianku arrived, he just happened to see the sly smile on his junior sister's face. He only felt that his junior sister was really cute like this. He sat down beside Gu Xingyin. I heard a piece of news recently. Gu Xingyin tilted her head to look at him. Xuanke said, it's about you. It said that someone has been poisoned by fire and needs your heart's blood to detoxify the poison. He seemed to be afraid that Gu Xingyin would be worried, so he added, Junior sister, don't worry. Those people can forget about this matter. The blood of a swordsman is very important. Besides, why would my junior sister sacrifice herself for a mere stranger? Don't worry, with me here, you don't have to worry. Gu Xingyin looked at him and smiled. Yes, with you here, I'm not afraid. Xuanke's face turned red again. The next day, Gu Xingyin was giving a lecture in the Sword Discourse Hall. When she was leaving, she met Zhao Ximing. What's the matter? Gu Xingyin asked. Zhao Ximing said earnestly, I received news recently that Bai Xinya seems to have been poisoned by fire and needs. He glanced at Gu Xingyin. Your blood is needed to cure her. That Shi Lufeng has always been lawless. Great Grandmaster, you must be careful. Gu Xingyin nodded. I already know about this. When Xianku arrived, he saw his junior apprentice sister, who had always been cold and emotionless, standing together with a man wearing the robes of an inner disciple. The two of them were extremely close to each other, and looking at junior apprentice sister's expression, the two of them seemed to be very familiar with each other. He didn't know why, but he remembered the conversation he had with his junior sister before. With his junior sister's charm, she must have many admirers in the sect. Thinking of this, an uncontrollable anger rose in his heart. Junior sister. He quickly walked to Gu Xingyin's side. Zhao Ximing recognized this Lingyun venerable and quickly bowed to him. Senior brother, you're here? Xuanke looked at Zhao Ximing. And this is? Zhao Ximing only felt that Xuanke was looking at him. His eyes were very calm, but he felt as if there was a heavy pressure coming towards him. In just a moment, he was drenched in cold sweat. He tried his best to straighten his back and not lose his composure. Seeing this, Xuanke's eyes flashed with a touch of admiration. However, in the next second, when he thought of how close his junior sister was to him, his heart immediately became even more unhappy. Gu Xingyin did not notice his thoughts and only said, his name is Zhao Ximing. When Xuanke saw that his junior sister's expression didn't change at all when she mentioned Zhao Ximing, he felt a little better. He said, I have something to talk to you about. Come with me. Gu Xingyin followed Xuanke to Lingyun Peak. What is it, senior brother? Xuanke was speechless. He just wanted Gu Xingyin to stay away from Zhao Ximing. What was there to talk about? Your martial uncle Ling Zhao's disciple. In terms of seniority, in the Star Gauze Sword Sect, except for me, everyone else is your junior. Junior sister, no matter how much those disciples admire you, it's impossible for you two to be together. Gu Xingyin was confused. Senior brother's strange words, what did he mean? While she was thinking, she suddenly looked up and saw Schwanka's expression. For a moment, she had an idea. Senior brother, could it be that you're enlightened? Gu Xingyin was secretly delighted, but she did not show it on her face as if she did not understand what he meant. She nodded obediently and said, I understand. If I want to find a Taoist companion, I will consider a disciple from another sect. Schwanka felt as if a basin of cold water was poured over his head. What did junior sister mean? As long as he thought about how his junior sister, who only knew how to smile and call him senior brother, would one day snuggle in the arms of another man and smile at him like a flower, he felt an endless killing intent in his heart. He looked at Gu Xingyin with a heavy expression. I forbid it. Chapter 109. Gu Xingyin raised her head. She didn't seem to understand why her normally gentle senior apprentice brother was suddenly so angry. She was a little uneasy. What's wrong, senior apprentice brother? Did I say something wrong? Could it be that the people outside can't do it? Schwanka looked at his normally cold junior apprentice sister who was surprised and uneasy because of his words. Her seductive red lips opened and closed, as if waiting for someone to pluck them. A thought that he had never had before suddenly surged in his heart. This thought came too suddenly and too violently. He couldn't control himself, and he didn't want to control himself. So he followed his heart. This kiss came too suddenly. The second before Gu Xingyin was kissed, she was still complaining to the system, if I knew that being jealous was so useful, I would have used it long ago. After that, she fell into a daze. Schwanka's kiss was completely different from his gentle appearance. His right hand tightly held Gu Xingyin's waist, his left hand holding the back of her head, not giving her any chance to escape. She could only weakly put her hands on his shoulders and softly fall into his arms. After the kiss, Schwanka's hand on Gu Xingyin's waist did not let go. He looked at his junior apprentice sister who was half leaning in his arms with a bright red face and slightly panting. The doubts that had been tangled in his heart for a while were solved. So, he actually had this kind of feeling towards his junior apprentice sister. No wonder he would miss her when he didn't see her for a few days, and would feel uncomfortable when he saw her being intimate with other men. He lowered his head and pecked Gu Xingyin's lips again, saying in an incomparably solemn voice, No, the disciples of the sect can't do it, and the people outside can't do it either. Other than senior apprentice brother, no one can be your Tao companion. Gu Xingyin blushed. Even though they were already an old married couple, hearing such overbearing words of love, her face would still heat up. Seeing that his junior sister seemed to be stunned by his words, Schwanka looked at her with a smile, patiently waiting for her response. Gu Xingyin only regained her senses after a long while. She stared blankly at her senior brother, as if she was frightened. Then, her cheeks slowly turned red. Even her white jade-like earlobes were dyed with a layer of pink. Then, she pushed Schwanka away with all her might and ran away. Xian Ku, however, began to smile slowly. Looking at his junior sister's reaction, it was clear that she had feelings for him. At this time, Gu Xingyin was sitting alone. She was in a very good mood and asked some questions that she usually did not dare to ask. System, how many missions do I need to complete? If she didn't do the quest, would she never see him again? What would happen if I stopped doing quests? Will it be destroyed? She asked. The system paused for a moment, as if it was looking for an answer. After a while, it said, There is no limit to the number of missions you can complete in the 3,000 worlds under Master's control. The target that the host inquired about could not be found. Last question, the host can rest assured. You are Master's most perfect creation, so you will not be abandoned. Although she did not get the answer she wanted, Gu Xingyin still felt relieved. No matter what, to be able to meet him in the quests was already a blessing that others could not ask for. Gu Xingyin was in a very good mood. The wind by the cliff was also very comfortable. She actually fell asleep here unknowingly. When Schwanka came over, he saw his junior sister who was sleeping soundly. His gentle gaze wandered around her face for a moment. Then, he bent over and picked her up. Gu Xingyin felt the familiar embrace in a daze. She only rubbed against his chest, let out a few meaningless murmurs, and fell asleep again. Seeing that his junior sister trusted him so much, Schwanka's expression became even more gentle. Chapter 110. Gu Xingyin slept very well. Ever since she came to this world, sword cultivators could meditate to recover their energy. It was very rare for her to fall into a complete sleep like this. Schwanka was reading with his back to her. Gu Xingyin's heart skipped a beat. She quietly stood up, ready to give him a scare. She really hadn't woken up yet. How sharp were the 5 senses of a sword saint? As soon as Gu Xingyin woke up, Schwanka noticed the change in her breathing. Thus, Gu Xingyin, who tried to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it, was easily pulled into the man's arms. Senior martial brother. Gu Xingyin was clearly not used to it. She looked at Schwanka shyly. How could he have known that she would look like this? She had just woken up and her hair and clothes were a bit messy. Her eyes were also misty. The corners of her eyes and nose were bright red. Her neck revealed a trace of delicate collarbone. Schwanka's eyes darkened. He suppressed the angry thoughts in his heart and said to Gu Xingyin, "When martial uncle comes out of seclusion, I will go and ask for junior martial sister's hand in marriage. When I get his approval, I will go to the Gu clan to give the betrothal gifts. Martial uncle will preside over our marriage." Although Gu Xingyin was a bit uncomfortable, she still nodded. When Venerable Ling Xiao found out about this, he was very happy. He didn't have long to live. The only thing he was worried about was this female disciple of his. He had seen Schwanka's character and strength. As her master, he was naturally happy to see them become Dao companions. After his master agreed, it was time to go to the clan. "Junior martial sister, you go back to the clan first. In the future, I will ask martial uncle to make the decision and personally go to the Gu clan to give the betrothal gifts," Schwanka said to Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin nodded. She knew that this was the custom of this world. Schwanka personally sent junior martial sister to the Stellar Sword Sex Mountain Gate. He was looking forward to their next meeting. At that time, his junior sister would be his rightful and proper person. At this moment, Schwanka had never imagined that meeting his junior sister again would not be the beautiful scene he had expected. At that time, he even wanted to destroy the world to vent the hatred in his heart. Gu Xingyin had sent a message to her family in advance. She did not have much affection for the Gu clan. After all, other than living in the Gu clan when she was 8 years old, she had not returned to her original body for more than 10 years. "Someone." Gu Xingyin stopped. "Come out," she said indifferently. A black-robed figure suddenly appeared in front of Gu Xingyin. "Little girl, you have sharp senses." The figure laughed strangely. Gu Xingyin had already unsheathed her long sword. She could feel the strength of the person in front of her. He was probably not someone she could withstand. When the black-robed man saw her appearance, he did not care at all. "A sword emperor who is not even 20 years old, you are indeed talented, as expected of the 10th level Ice Soul Sword Heart. But you are unlucky to have met." He suddenly stopped talking. In the next moment, he had already appeared behind Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin did not even have time to draw her sword. She felt her vision go black. Sword sect. This was the last consciousness Gu Xingyin had before she fainted. When she woke up again, she found herself in a luxurious room. However, there was a thin black chain around her hands and feet. She frowned. If she was not mistaken, this black chain was made of meteorites. It was specially made to imprison sword cultivators. She tried to circulate the qi in her dantian. As expected, it was empty. System, where am I? Chapter 111. Before the system answered, Gu Xingyin probably knew where she was. The door was opened with a creak, and a familiar face of Gu Xingyin appeared in front of her. Shi Lufeng. Gu Xingyin secretly said, "I tried to guard against it, but I didn't expect that I still couldn't avoid this plot." Shi Lufeng took Gu Weixin's heart blood for Bai Xinya. Even if she avoided meeting Shi Lufeng, she still couldn't avoid it. Shi Lufeng came in and saw that Gu Xingyin was awake. A trace of surprise flashed across his face, but it was quickly hidden. Ice Heart Sword Emperor, I've heard a lot about you. He greeted with a smile. Gu Xingyin glanced at him and said coldly, what does this mean? Shi Lufeng saw the other party's cold and arrogant attitude and didn't care. I think the Ice Heart Sword Emperor also knew the news that my lover was poisoned by fire and needed something to detoxify. Gu Xingyin, my heart's blood? Her eyes stared straight at Shi Lufeng. Shi Tian Pavilion's young pavilion master has ever thought, I Gu Wei Xian's heart blood, she cannot afford. Shi Lufeng only felt that the woman's gaze was too oppressive. He even had the idea of avoiding it for a moment, which made him feel embarrassed. He sneered and said, it's not up to the Ice Heart Sword Emperor to worry about it. I'll arrange it. Gu Xingyin sneered, is Shitian Pavilion ready to bear the anger of my master and senior brother? Shi Liufeng's heart flashed a trace of guilty conscience. This time he caught Gu Xingyin. He didn't tell his father that he lived in Shitian Pavilion. Because he knew that his father must not offend the Star Sword sect, which had 2 sword saints, for Xinya. But in front of Gu Xingyin, he naturally wouldn't show it. His tone was full of malice. As long as you don't say it, who will know that the Ice Heart Sword Emperor came to me before he disappeared? Gu Xingyin's heart sank. Shi Liufeng's meaning was clearly to get rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness, destroying the corpse and erasing all traces. After Shi Lufeng left, Gu Xingyin called out to the system, can you help me unlock this chain? The system replied, I'm sorry, host. The system is unable to exert any external force on anything in this world. Gu Xingyin. Then can you help me contact the people outside? The system said, hold on, let me check the authority. The system can randomly send a distress signal to anyone that the host has come into contact with. Gu Xingyin said helplessly, what if it's an outer sect disciple that you've only met once? The system said, the system authorization can only be issued once. This should be what the humans call, relying on luck? Gu Xingyin nearly choked. Although Gu Xingyin complained that the system was unreliable, it was still their only hope. Gu Xingyin only hoped that the system could randomly select a more reliable person. Zhao Shiming had just returned from sword practice. Ever since he used the fiery eye fluid to supplement the secret technique to refine his sword heart, his realm had improved very quickly. Now, he was very confident that he could get a good ranking in the upcoming Inner Sect Grand Competition, and strive to be accepted as a disciple by one of the elders. He thought of that figure that was as cold as snow. If that was the case, would he be closer to her? He didn't expect to be able to stand beside her. He only wanted to be able to look at her from afar. At this moment, a white light appeared in front of him. A row of fluorescent words slowly appeared in the air. Gu Weixin is in trouble. Shi Tian Pavilion Linquan Villa, save him quickly. Chapter 112. The light quickly dissipated as if it had never existed. Zhao Shiming didn't dare to hide anything. He immediately went to see the sect master. Are you serious? Sage Xing. He suddenly stood up from his seat. Junior Granduncle was the focus of the Star Luo sword sect, so there couldn't be any mistakes. Zhao Shiming shook his head. I only received this strange message. I didn't have time to check if it was true, so I hurried to see you. Xing. He glanced at him. You did well. I'll deal with this as soon as possible. Xing. He scanned the outside with his divine sense and issued several orders. Soon, the feedback he received caused him to frown. Ling Xiao Knight was in seclusion, Ling Yun Knight wasn't in the sect, and Junior Granduncle wasn't in the sect. Inform Xing Yu, Xing Yun, and Xing Feng to come to Star Luo Feng. Zhao Shiming didn't know what decision the sect master had made. After coming down from Star Luo Feng, he used several godly travel talismans and rushed to Linquan Villa. Gu Xingyin felt very cold. The feeling of having her essence blood forcibly extracted was really uncomfortable. Even though the system had shielded her from pain, the dizziness and the gradual coldness caused by excessive blood loss didn't disappear. Will I really die here? She forced herself to ask the system. The system seemed to answer something, but Gu Xingyin didn't hear it. She fell asleep. Young master, more than half of the essence blood in her heart has been extracted. It's more than enough to treat the fire poison. Shi Lufeng nodded with satisfaction. You did well. Get rid of this person for me. Remember, don't leave any traces. He took the jade bottle filled with Gu Xingyin's blood and left. The remaining person came to the bed. He was about to make a move when he saw Gu Xingyin's pale face due to excessive blood loss. He suddenly hesitated. He looked greedily at Gu Xingyin's snow-white face and felt his throat go dry. He murmured, "It's a pity to kill such a stunning beauty like her. Why don't you let me have some fun before she dies?" Of course, he couldn't do it here. Otherwise, the young master would definitely blame him. The man picked up the unconscious Gu Xingyin and walked out through a secret passage. They went all the way to a desolate and uninhabited place. What an exquisite person. The man's finger lingered on Gu Xingyin's face as a hint of madness flashed through his eyes. The proud daughter of the heavens had caused such a perfect person to be torn apart. This was truly a matter that made one's blood boil. He lowered his head and slowly unbuttoned Gu Xingyin's clothes. The system looked a little anxious, but no matter how it called out, Gu Xingyin did not respond at all. Gu Xingyin's belt had already been taken off, and her snow-white outer garment was spread open, revealing an equally snow-white inner garment. The man's throat couldn't help but swallow a few times. His hands were trembling with excitement. He was ready to remove the eyesore. Suddenly, his body shook, as if he had been attacked by something invisible. His whole body softly fell to the ground. The system ignored him. It was the system's product. This person would not wake up for 10 days to half a month. Host. Host, quickly wake up. The system looked at the host's increasingly pale face and couldn't help but feel anxious. It had never been so annoyed. It was only a guidance system, unlike some of its peers who could provide physical help to the host. Someone came? The system sensed the arrival of the person and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Chapter 113. Zhao Shiming was worrying about how to enter the waterside villa. The Washing Heavens pavilion was heavily guarded. It was a fool's dream for a swordsman like him to sneak in. An indescribable feeling attacked his heart, making him involuntarily walk in a certain direction. The more he walked, the more intense the feeling became until he saw the figure lying on the ground. Damn it! With just a glance, Zhao Shiming understood what had happened. He quickly ran forward and helped Gu Xingyin up. Great Martial Granduncle? Great Martial Granduncle! Only then did he realize that something was wrong with Gu Xingyin. Her face was pale and her breathing was weak. He reached out his hand and felt Gu Xingyin's pulse. Washing Heavens Pavilion. Zhao Shiming's eyes were almost red. Martial Granduncle's appearance clearly showed that his blood essence was almost completely drained. He trembled as he covered Gu Xingyin's clothes and tied her belt. Then, he walked to the unconscious man. Although he didn't know why the man was unconscious, Zhao Shiming didn't want to know. He unsheathed his sword and swung it down. System, well done. Zhao Shiming didn't dare to delay. He fed Gu Xingyin a qi-nourishing pill and said, "Sorry for the offense." Then, he carried her and rushed toward the Stellar Sword Sect. Xuanke, who was fighting with an overlord-class demonic beast in the distant western wasteland, suddenly felt a wave of panic. He didn't know where this feeling came from. He only felt that something unbearable had happened. Junior sister. His pupils shrank and his face turned pale. He took a look at the moon-crowned serene lotus that hadn't fully matured yet. This was a gift he had prepared for his junior sister. Now, he could only give it up for now. The few Taoists of the Stellar Sword Sect arrived at the waterside villa. Taoist Xing Yu's divine sense swept out. The divine sense belonging to the Sword Sect instantly surrounded the entire waterside villa and didn't miss a single corner. However, she didn't find Martial Granduncle's figure. She frowned doubtfully. Could it be that the information they received was wrong? No. She could clearly see that in one of the rooms, there was a thin and weak woman whose body was abnormally flushed. She was half lying and being fed a bowl of bright red medicine. How was that medicine? It was clearly a bowl of blood. Sage Xingyu suddenly recalled the rumor from a few days ago. Wasn't that woman suffering from fire poison? That bowl of blood? Sage Xingyu's face instantly darkened. She didn't say anything, but directly pulled out her sword and slashed at the Spirit Spring Manor. Junior sister, what's wrong? Reverend Xing Yun and Reverend Xing Feng, who were traveling together, looked at Reverend Xingyu in surprise. Sage Xingyu told them about his previous guess. How dare he from the heavens washing pavilion? Several elders were unable to restrain their anger. At this time, several disheveled figures flashed out. It was Shi Lufeng, Bai Xinya, and the others. They were sent by the Shitian Pavilion Master to protect him, and they managed to escape the calamity. Even so, the sword sect's sword was not easy to receive, and they seemed to be in a sorry state. Who are you people? Why did you suddenly attack my Linquan resort? Shi Lufeng recognized the Starnet sword sect's attire on the elders. His expression changed, and he forced himself to put on a brave front. Sage Xingyu flipped her hand and slashed at Bai Xinya. Block her. Shi Liufeng's eyes were about to split as he shouted to the two sword venerables beside him. Puff! Puff! The two sword venerables joined forces and suffered serious injuries, but they could only block Sage Xingyu's attack. Where is our young martial granduncle now? Sage Xingyu's face was frosty. Shi Lufeng gritted his teeth. What young martial granduncle? I don't know him at all. Seeing him like this, Sage Xingyu snorted. Without saying anything, she slashed at him again. Chapter 114. Shi Lufeng looked at the two sword venerables lying on the ground with a pale face. He never thought that the Star Sword sect would be so overbearing. Even without concrete evidence, they dared to injure people. He said sternly, "Are you declaring war on the Washing Heavens Pavilion?" Sage Xingyu wanted to attack again but was stopped by Sage Xingyun. Bring these two back to the sect and wait for the sect master to make a decision, Sage Xingyun said. He looked at the two people on the ground as if he was looking at two dead objects. Xuanke returned to the Star Sword sect and received a message from Sage Xing Luo in his cave. He was about to head to the Washing Heavens Pavilion when he sensed a familiar aura. It was Junior Sister. His figure flashed and disappeared from sight. Zhao Shiming carried the person in his arms and rushed for an entire day. When he saw the Star Sword sect in front of him, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. A huge pressure descended and almost made him kneel on the ground. Fortunately, in the next moment, the pressure disappeared without a trace, and his arms became empty at the same time. Suppressing the disappointment in his heart, Zhao Shiming only had time to see a figure flash by. Xuanke's hands that were holding Gu Xingyin were trembling. The breathing of the junior sister in his arms was so weak. Her face was so pale that it was transparent. It was as if she would disappear in the next second. Sage Xing Luo was the first to know that Gu Xingyin was rescued. In the next moment, Sage Xingyu and the rest returned to the sect. He immediately went to the Lingyun Peak but was blocked by the restriction outside Xuanke's cave. This block lasted for half a month. Until half a month later, Xuanke walked out. Sage Xing Luo thought that he was looking at Venerable Ling Xiao. Xuanke said coldly to Sage Xing Luo, "Guard Junior Sister for me." Sage Xing Luo asked, "Where is Martial Granduncle going?" Xuanke's eyes were filled with killing intent. It's time to settle the score between Junior Sister and the Washing Heavens Pavilion. In less than 2 days, the news of Venerable Lingyun of the Star Sword sect massacring the entire Washing Heavens Pavilion spread throughout the sky below world. From then on, the Heavenly Cleansing Pavilion no longer existed in this world. Shi Lufeng, who was locked up in the Star Gathering Sword sect's water prison, accidentally learned of this news. Impossible. I hid this from my father, so he didn't know about it. Your Star Azura Sword sect can't do this. He couldn't believe it. The Starnet Sword sect disciple in charge of the guard looked at him with a face full of resentment. Whether it's true or not, you just have to go out and take a look to know. It spread throughout the entire great sky billow world. From now on, there's no more heaven's washing pavilion. Oh, right. I almost forgot. You actually dared to harm great martial granduncle. You will never be able to go out again. Washing Heaven's pavilion collapsed onto the ground, exhausted. He had originally hoped that his father would come and rescue him, but he didn't expect that the Star Azura sword sect would actually act so ruthlessly. He had never thought that just because he did something so insignificant for the woman he loved, he would actually ruin the thousands of years of foundation of the Heaven's washing pavilion and the lives of countless disciples. It was all because of Bai Xinya. It was all her fault. He looked at Bai Xinya, who was curled up in the corner and struggling in pain, and a trace of hatred suddenly flashed through his eyes. If it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have been so hot-headed as to target the Iceheart Sword Monarch, and thus offend the Star-Gathering Sword Sect. If it wasn't for her, he would still be the high and mighty young master of the Washing Heavens Pavilion, pursued by everyone, and not fall into prison and be trampled on by others. If it wasn't for her, the Washing Heavens Pavilion wouldn't have collapsed, and his father wouldn't have died. If it wasn't for her, a trace of madness flashed through Shi Liufeng's eyes. Chapter 115. By the time the disciples of the Star Sword sect found out, Bai Xinya had already been killed by Shi Liufeng, who had fallen into madness. This woman probably never thought that she would one day die in the hands of a man who had always been obedient to her. When Gu Xingyin woke up, she felt weak all over. She was no stranger to this feeling. Gu Xingyin complained, "System, did you notice that I seem to have to experience the same scene in almost every world?" The system was a bit guilty. "Host, there's no way to control this. Every main character's path of growth is not smooth sailing." Gu Xingyin, Xuanke lifted the curtain and came in, his expression gentle. "Junior sister." Gu Xingyin smiled and wanted to get up, but found that her body didn't have the strength. She could only helplessly give up. "Senior brother, I didn't sleep for too long, right?" Xuanke greedily looked at this lively junior sister and said softly, "It's only been half a year." Gu Xingyin didn't know why, but she felt that although her senior brother looked the same as before, she had a strange feeling in her heart. She wanted to reach out for a cup, but Xuanke held her down and personally filled her cup. He also refused her request to do it himself and fed her without any explanation. It was clear that her senior brother was treating her like a fragile crystal person. "I'm fine, senior brother." Gu Xingyin was helpless. In this half-year, the Star Sword sect used all of its power to find treasures for Gu Xingyin to nurse her body back to health. Xuanke didn't hesitate to use his true qi every day to help her unblock her meridians. Gu Xingyin's body had gradually returned to normal because of the lack of blood essence. In the face of Gu Xingyin's words, Xuanke smiled gently. "I know. Come, open your mouth." Gu Xingyin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Does this mean that I know what you mean, but I don't want to do it?" Not only did he not allow Gu Xingyin to do anything herself, but ever since Gu Xingyin woke up, Xuanke had never left her side. He even allowed her to get too close to others. Gu Xingyin also knew that her previous appearance might have frightened him. Although she felt a little helpless, she didn't reject this kind of behavior. Half a year later, the Starnet Sword Sect's Venerable Ling Xiao presided over the wedding between his personal disciple, the Iceheart Sword Monarch, and his martial nephew, the Venerable Ling Yun. It had become a major event in the great sky billow world in recent decades. After a few more years, the Iceheart Sword Sovereign successfully broke through and became the Iceheart Sword Venerable. Honorable Sword Master Iceheart and her Tao companion, the Cloud-Soaring Supremacy, had a very close relationship. Many people said that they had seen the figures of Honorable Sword Master Iceheart and the Cloud-Soaring Supremacy all over the Sky Surge Great World. 100 years later, Sword Venerable Iceheart broke through again and became the Iceheart Sword Master. Another 100 years later, the Grand Elder of the Starnet Sword Sect, the Venerable Ling Xiao, reached the end of his lifespan and closed his eyes at the Ling Xiao Peak. For the next 500 years, the world never saw the shadow of the Iceheart Sword Master again. Some said that she had suffered a huge blow due to her master's death, and was unable to recover from it. Others said that the Iceheart sword master had died in a duel 100 years ago. There were also some who said that the Iceheart sword master was only in seclusion to cultivate. Until one day, when the wind was gentle and the sun was bright, the sound of a sword in the 9 heavens rang out. All sword cultivators vaguely sensed something and looked in the same direction. The long swords in their hands were all unsheathed at the same time, and their figures bent in the same direction. 10,000 swords bowed, and a sword saint appeared. That was the direction of the Starnet sword sect. From then on, the Iceheart sword sect no longer existed. There was only a sword saint expert, the Venerable Iceheart. Chapter 116. Gu Xingyin found herself in a car. Sitting beside her was a very capable woman wearing a black business suit and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. Seeing that she had woken up, she took out a bottle of water from her handbag and handed it to her. "You must be tired today. I've pushed back all the jobs for you for the next week. You should have a good rest." Gu Xingyin cheered. "Thank you, Sister Chen." In this world, the original name was Ruan Kei. Now, she was a well-known movie queen in Z country. The woman in the black suit was her manager, Chen Rong. Ruan Kei was a model. She was born with a good foundation. She had a slim waist and long legs. Her facial features were exquisite. When she was 18 years old, she won the international supermodel competition. In 2 years, she was promoted to the ranks of the international supermodels. When she was 20 years old, she started to enter the entertainment industry. Now, she was 24 years old, and she was already the #1 female star in Z country. Because she was a supermodel, Ruan Kei had a strong aura. People who stood beside her would often unconsciously feel suppressed. Therefore, Ruan Kei was affectionately called Her Majesty by her fans. Only Chen Rong knew that this, Her Majesty, who was incomparably powerful in front of her fans, was actually a little princess with a pink heart in private. The car soon arrived at the apartment where Ruan Kei lived. This was provided by Ruan Kei's entertainment company, Star Entertainment. It was one of the famous rich areas in Jianghu City. The security measures were excellent, and even paparazzi would have a hard time entering. Chen Rong personally sent Gu Xingyin to the door of the room. She only left after watching her enter the room. Gu Xingyin felt weak at this time. In her previous world, she was a sword saint. She rarely had this kind of feeling. She walked into the bathroom, filled the bathtub with hot water, dripped essential oil, and soaked herself in. She comfortably moaned and began to organize the information about this world in her mind. The original Ruan Kei was now an internationally renowned movie queen, and the other target was now awkwardly playing a small supporting role. Ming Shujia. This woman was about the same age as Ruan Kei, but her fate was completely different. Her appearance was not too outstanding in the entertainment industry where beauties were everywhere. Her facial features were not very distinctive. Since her debut, she had been receiving some small investment scripts. Even these scripts, she could only play a supporting role. However, at the age of 24, her luck seemed to have changed. First, the director of a low-budget literary film took a fancy to her and informed her to audition for the lead role. No one knew that this unremarkable literary film would actually win the Best Film Award at the internationally renowned film festival at that time. Although she herself did not win the Best Actress award, she became famous because of this and quickly entered the public eye. After that, all kinds of good things came one after another. She took on several scripts that were not well known but had a good reputation after being released. Gradually, she was promoted from a small actress to the ranks of the popular starlets. Everyone thought that she was just lucky. There were even media reports that called her the luckiest artist of the year. However, Gu Xingyin knew that it wasn't because she was lucky, but because Ming Shujia wasn't Ming Shujia at all. The original Ming Shujia fell down while hanging on a wire and was sent to the hospital with a concussion. When she woke up again, no one knew that her soul had changed. Chapter 117. The soul that occupied Ming Shujia's body came from 10 years later, so she knew which of the current scripts would be dark horses and which would be popular. With such a big cheat in her hands, it was hard for Ming Shujia not to be popular. If that was the case, Ruan Qi and her would not have had much interaction, let alone any enmity. However, Ruan Qi was one of the few actors in the entertainment industry who was clean and honest. She had fame, ability, and capital. She did not need to rely on those things to create momentum for herself and fight for resources for herself. Ming Shujia was different. Therefore, during a banquet with an investor, Ming Shujia was met by Ruan Qi, who came to eat with her friends. If a female star was exposed to this kind of thing, especially someone like Ming Shujia who walked the youthful path, her career would be ruined. Actually, they only had a quick glance at each other. Ming Shujia had heavy makeup on, so Ruan Qi did not recognize her at all. However, the next day, Ming Shujia was still exposed to the news of having fun with a rich businessman late at night. Although the photo was vague and there was no real evidence, Ming Shujia's company's PR team dealt with it quickly. At this time, Ming Shujia was not affected. However, she used this opportunity to hate Ruan Qi. She thought that it was her who leaked the news to the media, which put her in danger. Ming Shujia's revenge came quickly. She knew some inside information that others did not know. She even secretly colluded with a rich man who was rumored to be in love with the queen. She promised that as long as he did what she wanted, she would help him get Ruan Qi. The two of them conspired to drug Ruan Qi at a banquet. The rich man could not help but loot a burning house and possess Ruan Qi. He even purposely leaked the news to the media. Ruan Qi's reputation fell to the bottom. At this time, the rich man affectionately said that he had loved her for a long time and was willing to marry her. At that time, Ruan Qi was deeply touched and married him regardless of her manager's objection. However, not long after the marriage, she found that the rich man was not loyal to his marriage. He had other women outside. She was furious, but only received disdainful mockery from her husband. "You're just an actress that everyone hates. Do you really think you're still the queen?" Ruan Qi wanted a divorce, but her husband threatened her with her virginity. Her life was miserable, and her parents, who were university professors, were fired because of her. After muddling along for a few years, she finally embarked on the path of no return, suicide. As for Ming Shujia, she relied on her unique vision and smoothly became the new generation's movie queen. Gu Xingyin calculated the time. Ming Shujia had just accepted an artistic film that would allow her to make a comeback. The cast had just been selected. In other words, the current Ming Shujia was still a small artist who was struggling on the sidelines. Gu Xingyin didn't take her too seriously. With Ruan Qi's current status, she didn't even need to do anything to Ming Shujia. She thought for a moment and said to the system, help me collect a photo of Ming Shujia drinking with an investor. I want her role to be cancelled." As far as she knew, Ming Shujia had attended quite a number of such banquets in her early days. The system was quite efficient in collecting information. In less than an hour, a bunch of photos of actors being slept with appeared on the major gossip forums. Chapter 118. Why? Ming Shujia looked at the director in disbelief. She had just been informed that the female lead had been replaced. How could she accept this? Although this literary film had a small investment, it had a good reputation. In order to get the role of the female lead, she had done a lot of preparation. She didn't even hesitate to put down her status to accompany those fat men. The director took out his phone and opened a web page for her to see. "You also know that our film is going for the path of youth and pure love. Let's not talk about other things first. The female lead actress must not have any scandals. Otherwise, it will have a big impact on the film." The director was also a little disappointed with Ming Shujia. When he first saw her, he was very satisfied. Ming Shujia's fresh and natural aura was exactly the image of the female lead in his mind. Unfortunately, it was useless now. When the film was broadcasted, the audience would think of the scandals on the internet when they saw the female lead. This film was not one of those brainless commercial films that sold gimmicks to gain popularity. If this happened, it would undoubtedly be a fatal blow to the ambitious director who participated in the film festival. Ming Shujia's heart was miserable. She didn't know who she had offended to be assigned such a thing. In this way, it was impossible for her to get the role. At this time, Gu Xingyin was sleeping soundly when she was woken up by a call from her best friend. She asked the queen to pick her up at the airport. Song Sisi was the best friend who grew up with the original owner. Now, he was a slightly famous fashion designer. Gu Xingyin put on her sunglasses and baseball cap and went to the airport. "I missed you so much." Song Sisi gave Gu Xingyin a loving hug and then looked at Gu Xingyin with shining eyes. "Cuckoo, you are really getting more and more beautiful. Your long legs are really mesmerizing." For fashion designers, a good figure was more important than anything else. Ruan Kei was 1.78 meters tall. Her figure was almost perfect. Her long legs were the envy of others. Song Sisi always drooled when looking at her. "Okay, let's go back and eat first." The two chatted happily and didn't notice that in the VIP passage not far away, a tall man wearing sunglasses was looking at them for a long time until they left. Ruan Kei. The man softly uttered the name, his beautifully curved lips forming a mesmerizing smile. "Finally. I found you. Mr. Gardner?" The staff next to him shouted in confusion. The man came back to his senses and said lightly, "Let's go." After dinner, Ruan Kei was dragged by Song Sisi to the villa where she lived. That's right, a villa. Song Sisi was a rich second-generation heir, so she generously used more than 10 rooms to store her works. Gu Xingyin was pulled over by her to act as a fitting rack. Gu Xingyin looked at the room full of clothes. She had to admit that Song Sisi had an amazing talent in fashion design. Inspiration, the dream of all designers. Although these clothes didn't look perfect, some of the details were amazing. Gu Xingyin knew that in the upcoming fashion show, Song Sisi would shock the world with a set of male and female, frost domain.